Hello, my friends. Welcome to another Chit Chats with Git Cats. And I didn't keep track of what number we're up to, but it's about a number 30 or something. And it's getting easier. I'm not getting freaked out with the whole live to air thing, which is great because if you've watched any of these, you may have seen that I was pretty bad at this to start off with. And, oh, what was that? I just hit the wrong button, but that's okay. That's okay. We hit the right button and get me back. That's because the internet is in front of me and I don't want that on. See? Live to air. That's what happens. I'm not freaked out. Turn the internet off on your MacBook. But as usual, no bad days. Got my coffee and ding dong, who's at my door? None other than Mr. Brett Garsed. Hey, Brett, how you doing?
Very good.
That's good, mate. Thanks for coming along.
Oh, my pleasure. I've travelled so far.
From the comfort of your, is this your man cave where you are now?
Yeah. It's we built this house about 8 years ago, and I took over the 2-car garage that normally comes with it. So now it's my excuse for a studio.
Nice one. Well, this is actually my lounge room that you can see here.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah. I got a little lounge chair there, and I don't actually own a TV. I've got my big iMac that I watch Netflix and YouTube and all that kind of thing on.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is these days. I like to work from home, so love it.
Fantastic.
Brett, I'm going to ask you what I ask everybody to start off, and that is, what began the love affair with the guitar for you? How did that all start?
I don't know if you can see it. I'll try and angle my camera. There's a red guitar about there. I don't know if anyone can see that.
Yeah, yep.
That guitar was owned by my older brother, John, and he was 10 years older than me. We lost him to cancer in about 2009, unfortunately, or 2002. What am I saying? Yeah, 2002. And, John had that guitar under the bed. It's an old Maton guitar. It's like a Maxwin or something like that,
okay,
by Maton. So, he was quite a good player, but he had to give it up and focus on running the farm after my father passed away from cancer. So the guitar just sat idle under the bed, and I'd get it out and look at it, and there was a guitar cable in the case. And I remember I'd ask him about it, and I'd say, "What's up with this?" And he said, "It's an electric guitar." And I thought, brilliant. So I went around looking for a power point to plug it into, and that didn't work, and thank God. And tried plugging it into the headphone jack on the stereo because it fit, but that didn't work. And but I'd still get it out, and I'd muck about with it. And my brother-in-law Greg would actually play it sometimes, so it was always in tune. So at least there was that. And my brother's chord book was in there, which just had chord diagrams, and I think it was Greg that showed me how to read those, and he said, "Yeah, look, here's the strings, here's the low, high. If there's an X above it, don't play that string. If there's an O, you play it open, and if there's a number on the string, that's where you put your finger on the fret." And I thought, seems pretty straightforward. So, and I did. So I remember discovering that if you held your finger on the high string and hit it and moved your finger up, the notes went up. Cool. And then they went back down again, which was a revelation. And then there was a song by Status Quo called "Pictures of Matchstick Men." I don't know if anyone remembers that, because it's long before they became the sort of the band we knew them to be. It was when they were a bit psychedelic back in the 60s, and my brother had that single, and I remember listening to it going, had a guitar intro that was just pretty much played on the high E string, and I thought, honestly, how hard could it be? And I just kept poking around until I found the right note, and then I just sat there and worked it out. And
cool.
That was the first thing I ever transcribed, I suppose you'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And so I suppose it sort of showed me that I had a good ear. Like, I had a good ear and a good understanding for how music sort of functioned. I even made up a little song just using the open strings, which had a 4-bar structure and it had harmony to it. Like, it was certainly wasn't any work of genius, but it just showed that there was an aptitude there that I connected with and with the instrument. And so I ended up taking some lessons off a guy here in the very town I'm living in, Castlemaine, named Jeff Lyons. And Jeff was a local legend for good reason. He was the only guy in town that could, or that anyone even knew of, that could play "I'm Going Home" by 10 years after. And,
Okay.
so yeah, Jeff was quite the gun, and he taught me sort of. The first song he taught me was "Seasons of Changes" by Black Feather, I think. "Seasons of Change," I think that's the song. Just sort of the intro, and then some chords, and then a boogie woogie bass line, and a couple of other things, and then I sort of gave it up for a while, lost interest in it, and then my cousin Andrew came up to visit one day, and we were poking around in the bedroom, and he looked under the bed and found the guitar, and "You've got a guitar, you know?" And I said, "Oh, no, not only have I got a guitar, I can play it, mate." So I got it out and played my 4 lessons for him. And luckily for me, he was just full of inspiration and said, "That's it, we're forming a band." So
Cool.
So yeah, he was the guy. Andrew was the guy that got the whole ball rolling.
And what age was that you started playing, that you put together your little band?
About 12.
About 12. Yeah.
Yeah, Andrew was older. There was Andrew, my other cousin Neil, and our friend Ken. Ken and Andrew were the eldest. They were about 17. I think Neil was about 15, and I was probably about 13 when we did our first gig right here in Castlemaine at the Railway Hotel.
Cool.
So,
Cool.
hysterically funny times.
Yeah. And
great fun.
do you remember what songs you played at your first gig?
Oh, I remember vividly. Yeah. Massive amounts of Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix. We just learned what we had, which is what we liked. We had no idea that no one else was listening to this at all. Like we had Physical Graffiti, and the first like the second Zeppelin album with Whole Lotta Love on it, and we had Made in Japan, and my brother had the Isle of Wight album with Hendrix, and we just learned all the Creedence Clearwater stuff we could get our hands on, like anything that us or our family members were listening to. Oh, I was really lucky. My brother was just such a fan of guitar-oriented music, so he had Santana, Pink Floyd, Zeppelin Purple, you name it. He had it, and so that's what we played. And it was especially in a couple of years when disco really hit. It was just we suffered.
Really?
No one liked us at all. Like we'd play, they wanted to hear the Bee Gees.
Sure.
Nothing against the Bee Gees. I love the Bee Gees, but we just couldn't play it. Because we didn't have a keyboard player, and I remember we used to play in this pub at a town called Dalesford, just up the road, and it was just same old story. Usually playing to almost empty rooms. Everyone hated us, but we'd suffer through it. And these 4 or 5 guys came in one night, and we knew they weren't locals because we'd never seen them before. And they sat down on the table, and we thought, "Oh God, here we go." And we were playing really obscure stuff. We played the instrumental that Jimi Hendrix closed Woodstock with.
Oh, really?
Beautiful. Yeah, this beautiful ballad. Because we played Purple Haze, and that was the version we did. And we played that instrumental because I loved it and I learned it. It was as best I could.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the closest thing we had to a ballad. And I remember we played all the Richie Blackmore's Rainbow stuff because I just loved. Blackmore was the reason I even wanted to play.
Really?
And so we played all the Rainbow stuff we could learn. And these 4 guys are sitting there at this table, and they just started looking at us like, "Oh my God." They knew everything we played. They were roaring. They were the greatest crowd we ever played for in our lives.
Cool.
Yeah. They come up to us afterwards and said, "We've never heard anyone play this music before." And we said, "We've never seen anyone like this music before, other than us." And it was a treat. So.
And do you remember what type of gear you were using then? Was that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that red guitar, Andrew ended up buying the red guitar because I wanted the guitar with a whammy bar on it because Richie had a whammy bar. You got to go to the Strat, but we couldn't afford the Strat, so I bought a guitar called a Sakai or Sakai. I remember talking to Brett Kingman, and Brett had one as well, and they were just back in the days when those great Japanese instruments that were not good.
Yeah.
I remember I bought it and I brought it home. It did have a whammy bar that kind of bolted onto it, which eventually I just broke off. But I remember at the 14th fret, it didn't make any sound at all. All the strings just fretted out and buzzed.
Yeah.
And I thought, all guitars are probably like that. You probably just avoid that general area. So, we won't go into that. I didn't realise later on you could actually fix that. Yeah. So then I think I got a Strat copy of some kind, and pleaded with my mother eventually to will you buy me a Strat? I think I was about 13 or 14 at this time. And I was addicted to the guitar. Nothing had ever really captured me like this, like the guitar and music. It's just all I ever thought about. And the poor thing, she relented, and I'll go grab it. Hang on.
Okay. Let's have a look around his room while he's doing that. What can we see? Here we go.
Live. It's brilliant, isn't it? You know?
Yeah. I always end up grabbing a guitar during it somehow myself.
But yeah, she bought me this. So.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, look at that. Yeah, it was in pretty good nick when I got it, but I soon fixed that.
Yeah. So what year's that?
Well, it's almost nothing on it is original other than the body and I think the volume and tone knobs. But it's I think it's like a mid 70s type thing, or 74, 75.
Okay.
Right? And I've since put a different neck. This is actually I got this neck when I was in the States, and I think it was actually made by John Sir, to be honest.
Oh, nice one.
Yeah, I think it was. I could be wrong, but I think it was when he was still working at Fender, and he was doing some blank necks, and I got one for my Strat and one for the Telly, and just a big slab of maple. But yeah, Mum paid about $650 for that.
Wow.
We figured that out, and it'd probably be like buying a custom shop Strat, So it was a massive investment for her. She was a widower on a farm, and with a 16-year-old eldest son running the joint, and me, who wants a Strat. And I remember this little chubby kid would go waddling into the pubs here in town, and people would just lose their minds. I think it was one of 2 Fender Strats in Castlemaine, and
wow.
My mate Glenn Quill, who was another instrumental figure in my life, Quilly had the other one, and I know he's still got it too. His would be in showroom condition, I'm sure.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Quilly always looked after his gear. So.
I'd personally love to find myself a 73 Strat, because that's the year I was born. I don't think they're particularly known for being that good around that time, but just for the...
It was mine's it's a CBS one. I had the 3-bolt neck and the big headstock, which suited me fine because it looked like the one Richie was playing on the Machine Head inner sleeve, the Sunburst Strat with the maple neck.
Yeah.
And but I remember, I had a Jade Clubman amplifier.
Okay.
80 watts. Andrew bought all this stuff because he was the only guy that had a job. And before that, I had a 5-watt Coronet amplifier. And it's fantastic to think back about how Acme all the gear was back then, because now the stuff that you can actually begin with is really good gear, and it's cheap.
Totally.
You can buy a beginner guitar that you could continue to use for an entire career. And the same with an amp, and it won't break the bank at all. Like the family could set up their kids with great gear they could make some really good music on. But back then, you were either playing something good or you were playing something absolute rubbish. And I had the beautiful guitar, but still had this amp. And I think they're an Australian amp, Jade.
They are, yeah.
And it was brilliant. Like, it had a distortion knob on it, and which you could switch on, and we switched it on immediately and turned it flat out. And it had about as much gain as, I don't know, like a distortion pedal with about 10 seconds left in the battery, you know, like it was so lame. But I just learned to play on that. And then eventually Ken, the drummer, had a friend who was giving away all his gear, and he gave him an old wah fuzz pedal, which is still up the back there somewhere.
Oh, nice.
And doesn't work anymore. I've had people look at it, but they said, who knows what any of this stuff is? We wouldn't know. How would you know what the circuits are?
Yeah.
But the first time I plugged that fuzz in, that was life changing, because then I had sustain. So
nice. Yeah,
that was a big game changer.
Okay, so you said you played to the four guys in the pub in Castlemaine. Was that through the Jade amplifier, or did you have something bigger by then?
No, that was the Jade.
That was the Jade, yeah.
Yeah, it was many years later I got a Marshall, And, well, that was when I started working. I left school at about 14, 15 and got a plumbing apprenticeship.
Oh, cool.
It's just what people did around here. All us young guys went and got apprenticeships. We all became mechanics, fitters and turners, whatever. I actually wanted to be a welder. I wanted to be a boilermaker, but because I really liked welding, but that division of the big factory that I was going to go and do that in shut down. So then the plumbing apprenticeship I got was in the same factory. I drove past it whenever I go to Melbourne. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's great. I love driving past it and not going into it.
Yeah. And thinking, well, what could have been, if I didn't go down this way? Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to get a gold watch from that place.
No, not at all. So you mentioned Blackmore as a bit of an influence. And I got to say, a lot of the bands that you rattled off then, my friends who have older brothers are into all the Led Zepp, the Deep Purple and everything. So yeah. I'm going to be the first to admit I don't know too much in the way of the Blackmore and stuff. But do you think that was a very big influence on you trying to get the whole speedy...
Well, Richie was everything.
He was,
he was. It wasn't even like an influence. It was like a religion, you know.
Uh-huh.
I remember it very vividly. I couldn't have been any more than about 11, and we were having just a bit of a family get together at the farm, and all the brother-in-laws and everything, sisters were all there, and my other brother-in-law Rob had put on an album, and I looked at my brother John and I said, what's this? And he said, this is Deep Purple. He said, they're the loudest band in the world. And the album was in rock, so the song that came on was Speed King. And I mean, it's just nothing but, it's the closest thing you'll find to just progressive rock.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just guitar pyrotechnics 101. I mean, I went, oh, you know, the minute he said they were the loudest band in the world, I thought, yeah, they sound like it.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is brilliant. And then, of course, that's when I thought, this is what electric guitars sound like. I just expected to plug that Maton in and have that come out of it because it was just built into it. But I didn't realise you had to make it do it. But that was the first album once I had saved up enough money, that was the first album I ever bought. And just everything I heard from Richie from that point on just astonished me. Like, I just thought, I've never heard anyone get noises like this out of a guitar. And when I'd started to listen to other guitar players, and I'd say, this guy just stands alone. And he really does. Like, I mean, the more you go back and listen to what Blackmore was doing back then, he is the bridging gap between the really primitive 70s guitar players and that leap into the late 70s with your Van Halens and people like him and Brian May and Jeff Beck.
Yep.
They were this technical bridge of just that led us to the innovation of technique. And now when you see it where it's gone now with like Guthrie Govan and Andre Neary and people like that, like, they're just doing things. I often, my standard quote is, I feel like I'm watching The Matrix. Like, I feel like it's CGI. They're so damn incredible. I just think that can't be possible, can it?
Yeah.
But they're doing it, you know.
Yep.
And it's this Blackmore's part of that, you know. Like, you listen to the Highway Star solo, and that picking section in the middle is just, you know, that created Yngwie and Paul Gilbert and all those guys, whether they know it or not.
Sure,
I mean, I don't know.
Sure.
I know Yngwie was a Blackmore fan, but I don't know if Paul was. But there's a precision there that just it had not been seen yet.
Sure. It's funny you should say that, because a common thing I ask people, they usually say to me that they start off playing folk music and strumming, and then I'll often say, what bridged the gap? What got you from strumming the chords to the Bob Dylan songs to the sound that you are now? And there always seems to be something. You said Richie Blackmore. Two standout moments for me. The second one that happened was my friend played me Eruption by Van Halen. And I just
that'll do it, yeah.
What the hell was that? But the first one was, and this is around 86, and I was a 12-year-old kid who was playing The Shadows and, you know, all the surf guitar kind of tunes because you could at 12. But a standout moment for me,
stuff.
it is, and I'm so thankful that I got a grounding in that.
Yeah.
Because the touch and the feel, which is everything, I got a good grounding in that. I know guys who leapt straight into trying to learn Randy Rhoads, etc., and they don't have that. They can't play one note and just make it sing.
And with a clean tone as well.
Exactly.
Like no distortion. Like it's really, I got to meet Hank Marvin actually. Like many years ago, I was sorry to derail
You're
this.
right.
Years ago, we were touring with John and Olivia Newton-John, and we were playing in Perth, and Hank turned up, and Stuart Fraser and I got to go and get a photo with him and have a chat to him. What an awesome guy!
Well,
like just the most beautiful person.
He's on my radar. He's kind of one of those guys that's like, okay, keep. And I've been aware that he has lived in Perth for quite a while now.
Yeah.
So I might try and get him. I'm not sure if he's a private person or not. But I was saying about the Van Halen moment. But what happened before that was watching the TV, and John Farnham was doing huge sellout tours around Australia. You were a member of the band at the time. And on came this solo to Let Me Out. And it's funny, you had the big camera hanging off your guitar and everything.
Off that guitar.
Yeah, that was that guitar.
Yeah.
And I saw this and just went, what was that? I had no idea that was even possible. It was life-changing for me. And I actually just tried to load it into my software. And folks, I just got a new laptop and I'm running it all off today. I'm going to try and play that clip. Brett, I don't think you're going to be able to see this, so bear with me for the minute and a half as this plays, but I'm going to try and play that right now. Let's see if it works.
Brett Garsed on the guitar, folks, please.
Oh my God, I saw that as a 12-year-old. And as I said, mind blown. Brett, you couldn't see that then, but I'm sure you're well familiar with it.
Yeah. Be honest, Rick. It was the Garfield T-shirt that did it for you.
I didn't even notice it. I didn't even.
Vanguard back then.
We've just had a comment from Drew Barry's over in the States that said, Guthrie who?
Oh, God.
And my friend Link has just said, Eddie Van Halen, eat your heart out. So seriously, man, I saw that and just went, what was that? Like you were legato playing, all those harmonic things you were doing?
Well, that was all just trying to follow Eddie's lead. I mean, I think that's what I got from Eddie was like, you gotta be yourself, I suppose, you know. Mm-hmm. And even though, look, I was still blatantly copying Eddie, I was trying to mutate anything I could to at least go somewhere, you know, to do something a little different, rather than just do the finger tapping thing straight out of Eddie's playbook, you know. And then of course through Eddie I heard about Halen and Holdsworth, and when I heard Alan, I realised, you've got to be yourself. You've got to just find your thing. And I mean, look, not everyone can find their own thing like Alan. I mean, he was singular like that. That's above anything I ever tried to emulate or steal from Alan technically or anything like that. The thing that just struck me the most was I've never heard anyone like this guy. And throughout the rest of his career, I never ever did. I mean, Alan just kept evolving on his own, and it had nothing to do with anything that was happening around him. Yet there's this incredible Dave Chappelle quote. I think it's Dave Chappelle, and it was genius is when, I hope I can remember it. Genius is when everything before you is obsolete and everything after you bears your mark.
Wow.
And yeah, it's an amazing quote. It's something like that. He was referring to Richard Pryor, I think, so he was obviously referring to another comedian, but Alan sort of hits me that way where, well, you think of it, Alan is the guy that stopped Eddie in his tracks.
Yeah, right.
And Sean Lane. Like, I remember having a massive Alan rave with Sean Lane when I was living in the States. And it was great. Sean was the first guy I'd ever met that loved Alan's playing as much as I did. And we just had this, like, I was awestruck enough to just meet Sean, but we had this fantastic just Alan session, you know. And Sean said he just heard I think he just read it in the paper. This band called UK was playing in the park in Memphis. So he went down to check him out, and there's Alan standing there doing his thing. And Sean just said, that just stopped me right in the middle of what I was doing, and I went there, you know. And so when you figure, like, with Alan, it either hit you like that or it didn't.
Uh-huh.
And so, yeah, all those little tricks and everything, I mean, they're just dumb tricks, but
how old were you then?
How
old were you when in that
22, I think, 23.
Okay. And how old were you when you first started playing with John?
21. The first gig I did with John, well, when I first met John was the summer of 85. So it was before Whispering Jack.
Okay.
He was still in Little River Band at the time, and he decided to just do a short pub tour just to, you know, keep his chops up and have some fun.
Yep. And
so he put together a band that was a great band. It was David Hirschfelder was on keys. Sam C was also playing guitar. Nicky Nichols was on BVs. Bruno De Stanislau was playing bass, and Derek Pellicci was playing drums. So, and I remember it was funny too because I was so happy Sam was there because I was petrified. Like, I've never played I went straight from our local pub band to John. You know.
Wow.
Thought, I can't be the only guitar player. I don't even know how to play a funk rhythm. You know. And luckily Sam was there, and I thought, oh, thank God, you know, we've got a proper guitar player in the band. It was a shame because I was so in awe of Sam's ability, because especially when I found out he was just as good a keyboard player as he was guitar player. And he was such a beautiful slide player and all the rest of it. And I desperately wanted to get him aside and ask him questions, but I was just too shy.
Yeah.
I was just terribly shy and intimidated by the whole thing. It was a miracle I had the courage to do it. But
so was there an audition process to get the gig with Farnham?
Yeah, there was actually. Because what happened was, it's a bit of I've got to sort of wind back a bit. I was always reading Guitar Player magazine. I loved that magazine. It was sort of back when that really was the magazine.
Yep.
It wasn't Guitar World and Guitar for the Practicing Whatever and all the rest of it. So that was it. And Mike Varney started doing the Spotlight column, and I was really enjoying reading that. You know, where he'd take three unknowns and they'd send in, you know, hundreds of people would send in cassettes and things, and he'd choose three and shove them in the book and give them a bit of a boost. And I was enjoying reading that column, and I thought, I've never seen an Australian in here. So I thought, well, what have I got to lose? So I got my girlfriend to take a photo of me in front of the house with that guitar, and he put me in the book. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm the first Aussie to ever get in that book.
Oh, really? Cool.
In the Spotlight. I'm pretty sure I'm the first Australian in the Spotlight column because I read them all.
Yep. And
I'd never seen one in there until I was in it. So I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. But so yay me. But I thought, oh, great, now I've got a resume. You know, it's like the only real sort of outside opinion of my abilities, such as they were at the time. And I thought, well, what I can do is photocopy this and write letters and do a little demo tape and send that around to a few people and see if anyone's interested in hiring me as a guitar player. Look, my bar was set so low. I thought if I could get in a cover band in Melbourne and just work as a guitar player, I'd be happy. You know, that's it. Make enough to live on playing the guitar. Done. You know. And I sent out about at least a dozen handwritten letters and copied the cassettes, and nearly all of them came back because I think most of them ended up going to record companies. So I got there's this magazine called Sonics, and
I remember
they do
it.
they do a yearbook, and they just put in trade addresses, management, booking agencies, record companies. So I just went through the whole thing, and luckily one of the addresses was for the Wheatley organisation. And I thought, fair enough, all right, you get a cassette. And I got this beautiful letter. I'll never forget. I've still got the letter, still here.
Yep.
And it just, dear Brett, I just got your tape. Please call me, Glenn Wheatley. And I thought, this is a good one. I got
Nice.
they're either that short saying don't call me or do call me. And so I rang up Glenn, and he said, I want to put a band together for John so he can go out and do some gigs. Would you be interested? I said, oh, well, let me just check my schedule, So they organised for me to go to John's house down in, I don't know where he was living, down in Melbourne somewhere, Camberwell or something. And I just went out and knocked on the door, and John answered it. I couldn't believe it, And went in, and Ross Fraser was there, and they still, John's wife Jill still gives me grief about it to this day. I had this cassette player that I would use as a practice amp. You could just plug your guitar into it and press record, and it would come out the speaker.
Nice.
I had this Dodd preamp that I was running through the Marshall at the time, and it was only because I was too lazy to bring the Marshall back from our rehearsal space, know. And so I turned up with this cassette player and the Dodd preamp, and Jill still says, "Yeah, you turned up with this cassette player, you whacker." And yeah, I know. And but they were working on a demo for Let Me Out at the time, and they said, this song's got a bit of a solo break in it. You want to take a shot at it? And I said, sure. So I did 2 takes, and I got really lucky and didn't fluff anything, and they really liked it. Now, here's the thing. I remember it was in a really strange key, not the key that we did it on the album. And it put the solo in a weird key, like it was in flats and, but I was just mainly an wing it by ear guy anyway, so it didn't matter. But Ross said, what would you play in the verses? And I said, I don't know, there's no vocal. And John said, I'll chuck a vocal on for you. So he just grabbed a 58 and stood there in his lounge room. And so here's the thing, that song is in, the main part of the song, with the lyrics in it, is in F sharp on the album. I remember distinctly the demo was in A. So it's an upper minor third.
Whoa.
And he stood there in his lounge room. He's hitting like high G's, like 15th fret, high E string on a guitar, G's. No warm-up, no nothing. Just grabbed a mic, and I'm just sitting there watching him and listening to this. Because, see, here's the thing. Like, I don't know how long before this, I've got to try and track the date down. Me and my petrol head mates here from Castlemaine drove all the way to Bathurst to go to the Bathurst 1000, right? And if you bought a ticket to the race, you could go to this concert that they had there, because they just built an amphitheatre, and the first gig was LRB.
Oh, cool.
And so we thought, great, and I was already a fan of John's. Like, I loved the Net album, and I loved the Uncovered record. And I thought, man, I'd love to know if this guy can hit this stuff live, because he's a hell of a singer. And so we go to this gig, and that's when I stood there watching him, and I realised that he is actually holding back in the studio. I thought, because he obliterated what he did on the albums live. I was such a fan of heavy rock and metal and all this stuff, and I was always a bit disappointed when I'd hear live recordings and I'd go to gigs, and the singers always ducked melodies and held the mic out to the crowd because I ran out of breath. And I thought, this guy's like a superhero. I've never seen anything or heard anything like this. And then he did it for me. Not that long afterwards, I'm in his house, and he did it for me in his lounge room. So
wow,
yeah, it was unbelievable.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
And I've 35 years later, I'm still just standing there going, I can't believe what I'm hearing. You know?
Yeah.
Amazing.
So you did leave for a while, and you went to the States, and you played with Nelson, right? Yeah. Did you know in the back of your mind that you'd always come back someday?
It's I've talked about this in other interviews, and it's hard to talk about because it's hard to sort of balance it, because if I take the life I had there and the people I've met and that are in my life now and always will be that are in America, then I wouldn't trade any of it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I think about some of the experiences I had there, and hindsight being 2020, I look at it and go, what was I thinking?
Mm.
And then I look at why would I leave John's band? Why would I not stay with John and just continue working with the guy I believe to be the greatest singer that's ever lived? I mean,
you're not wrong there. You're not wrong there.
I don't have an answer for you. I don't even really know. The one thing about it is that having done it, it removed all questions. If I hadn't done it, I'd be sitting here going, what if I had done it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now I know. I did it, and I know what it's like to go to America, live as an American, and tour America. And I suppose I got to do it at the last dying gasp of what was the 80s music scene there, which was a unique moment. And then I got to experience the changing of the guard from one style of rock into the next one. And then I kept living. I was there for 13 years. I mean, then I got to watch rock not be the thing anymore and have it move into rap and hip hop, and R&B. And
yep.
So it was a unique experience to be there and live there. And I remember Vanetta Fields was in John's band, and I remember having a conversation with her because other people were in my ear, and I was listening to it because I was so naive. I was just happy to be playing music. I couldn't care less about money or anything like that. It didn't make any difference to me. I thought, at least I'm not plumbing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care if they pay me $10 a week. I'm happy,
Yep.
And people were always like, we need more money. We should be getting more money. And I thought, okay, that's what professional musicians say. We should get more money. I was so naive. I didn't know.
Yep.
So I was sitting next to Vanetta on a plane, and hey, Vanetta. Mm-hmm. I said, we should be getting more money. And she just went, excuse me? And I was like, we should be getting more money? And she said, you got to pay some dues before you get some more money, honey. And then she started, and like, I love Vanetta to this day. I'm so honoured to call her a friend, and she proceeded to tell me a few stories about when she was in the Ike and Tina Turner band, and a few stories that pretty much just left me with my mouth hanging open in shock.
Yeah.
And that are even more poignant in this moment now than they even were back then for me. But so maybe that's what I had to do too. I paid some dues over there, I got to tell you.
Yeah. So sorry to cut you off there. When you were saying about the audition with Farnham, well, getting together and him hitting those notes in the lounge room and everything, you knew he was a mind-blowing singer. Did you think that he would become such a commercial success as he did? Because a lot of my viewers are international. I got to say, I won't get into the figures, but I have a very low viewing audience in Australia. When I mention John Farnham, a lot of them aren't aware of him. And I encourage you guys to go out and watch him on YouTube or whatever. He really is one of the best singers in the world live. Did you think that it would take off to be such a commercial success? Because he was everywhere. Late 80s, early 90s.
Well, I thought it should be, because I didn't look at things based on trends or fashion. I just looked at what was in front of me and went, that's incredible, that deserves to be heard, that should be huge. I remember the very first rehearsal we had with that initial band, that pub band, and I was driving a Mazda 626 back then, and John turned up to the same rehearsal in his Mazda 626, which was older than mine and more beat up.
Wow.
And I'm just going, what's happening here, And I remember later on, I was telling people I was going to do an album with him, because this was in 86 and they were already working on Whispering Jack. And I said, yeah, I'm doing an album with John Farnham. It's going to be great. And a lot of people I spoke to, they said, wow, well, that guy, one of the greatest singers. And if anyone ever deserved it, it's him, but it's over. He's passed. It's gone.
Yep.
And I never really listened to any of that, but no one believed it. No one believed it. In fact, I would go as far as to say I bet a lot of people would have thought, well, yeah, I'm trying to look at this young act over here. And then, of course, the minute the whole thing exploded, Oh, there were guitar players calling the gigs, saying, "Yeah, I'm coming down to audition for the guitar player's spot." Because
Really?
Oh, yeah, there were guys ringing up saying, "Well, I'm the best guitarist in Australia." These were well-known names. If I drop the names, you'd know who they are. And they were like,
Wow.
then they wanted to work with John Farnham.
Yep.
Then okay, so he's hot. Okay, yeah, now I want to work with him. And, much to John's credit, it was an enormous leap of faith to put that much faith in me because I was so young and raw. But, he's done nothing but never done anything but believe in me, and I just can't thank him enough for that. He's just always been that guy that just said, "Be yourself, do your thing."
So one thing about Farnham is there's the John Farnham Band, and his film clips always feature the band. And he's a solo artist. He could just, hey, it's all about me. But that's one thing. He's always had his band in there, and he's always featured them. So it sounds like he's out to look after you guys and go, hey.
That's John.
Yeah.
That's the guy. That's why, what people are like, especially Australians sometimes. They're just knockers,
Mm-hmm.
They just like to just sort of give people a bit of stick just because, and that they never know these people, They're famous, that guy,
Yep.
The amount of just stuff you got to tolerate. And have you ever met the man? Have you ever met him? He's like one of the most humble, decent people you'd ever meet. Down to earth. He could be the most arrogant tosser based on just the magnitude of his success, and he's nothing like that,
Yep.
And it's it's an endless source of frustration to me that people read him that way, and it's not like that at all. John's just an incredibly humble person with just a phenomenal talent. I don't know. Even when we did that big Fiery gig earlier in the year, and everyone's raving about Adam Lambert, and I'm like, Adam Lambert is a fantastic singer, and maybe I shouldn't actually just bring up Adam's name because he is a fantastic singer.
Yep.
I love his
Yep.
voice. But I think it's just the fact that I've had the benefit of standing next to John for the better part of 35 years and hearing him consistently bang out those notes. We don't drop keys. If he doesn't feel like he wants to sing a song anymore, or he can't give it the oomph that he needs to give it in the middle of a 1.5, 2 hour show, then it's gone.
Yep.
You don't drop the key.
Yep.
And you pretty much get the same show out of that guy you got back in 1986.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Just give us 2 seconds. I'm just going to turn the heater on.
You're right, mate. You go for it. And when he comes back, I'm going to ask Brett about his time in LA when he did split for a little while. He's back now.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
You're right, mate. You're right. I was just saying I'm going to ask you about when you did depart the camp for a little while and you went over. You went to LA, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Had you already lined up the gig with Nelson, or did you go over there and sort of think, okay, I'm here. Who wants me?
No, it was lined up. A wonderful fellow named Jeff Shoecraft was co-managing Nelson at the time, and Jeff worked with John in Little River Band management. Okay. And that's how he knew me and the connection there. And at the time, John wasn't really doing a lot. He was going to take a bit of a hiatus, and I think what sort of, I'd broken up with my girlfriend, so I was a bit sort of miserable, and I was living in Melbourne trying to sort of get some other work happening in the interim, and you just can't just jump into a scene and expect people to want to hire you, and so I was sort of struggling a bit, and then this offer came up to come to the States, and I think I was at the stage where I just didn't really care too much about myself, so I thought, okay, why not, Jeff said, yeah, come on over, see what you think. And so I just went over there, and he gave me he sort of put me in a room at the Oakwood Apartments. If anyone knows the Oakwood Apartments in North Hollywood there, then you know what I'm talking about. And he just gave me a cassette player and said, here's the demos, they'll be over later this arvo to pick you up, and And I sat there listening to the demos and went, man, these are hits. These are great songs. And they really are. I mean, I love those songs and still do.
Yep.
And Matt and Gunnar came over, and they were just great guys, you know, really just normal, down-to-earth guys. And we got together in the afternoon. I met Bobby Rock, the drummer. Bobby's, you know, one of my dearest, oldest friends to this day. I just spoke to him yesterday.
Nice,
you know?
nice.
I met Paul Merkovich, incredible keyboard player, sort of almost the MD for the band. And yeah, we just got on like a house on fire. It was really good fun.
Yep.
And it wasn't at all like a really serious audition process or anything. But it ended up just Bobby and Matt and Gunnar and I just went into SIR Studios and jammed for a few weeks and played the songs and got to know each other, and we just hit it off.
Nice.
You know? And I went back later that year to do the album, and it's just such a fascinating education in how the industry worked there, the American industry, and how different it is to what I'd known here in Australia, because this is before MTV was a thing here, you know. I think MTV in Australia was like 2 hours on a Saturday night, whereas in America it was the 24/7 TV channel.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, I remember in '89 when I was going back over there, and I remember I'd watch a lot of MTV during the day because I didn't have a lot to do at the time. And there was a show called Yo MTV Raps. And it was a half-hour show, and that was how much time they devoted to rap and hip-hop. And they'd replay it. So it was the same half hour in the morning and the afternoon. And I'd watch it, and I'd really enjoyed it. And thought, man, I've never seen anything like this before. This is interesting. It's fascinating to think that now it's almost like, yeah, let's have a show called Yo MTV Rocks, and put a bit of rock music on in between all the rap and hip-hop, which dominates the scene now. You know, it's incredible to see that changing of the guard and the evolution of music. And I was living there when it all happened, so very strange.
MTV doesn't play music anymore.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, which is ironic. So when you were over there, were you doing a bit of teaching at GIT, stuff like that? Were you doing masterclasses?
Yeah, well, that was another... I forget how that even happened. I'm pretty sure it happened through TJ Helmrich. Like, I got to know TJ when we were doing the Nelson record, and he heard some of my playing on there, and he really liked it. He was working at Cherokee Studios where we were recording it, and he just liked my playing and introduced himself. And once I jammed with him, I was just like, man, this guy's unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, and we became really good friends. And TJ was teaching up at GIT, and I think he put in a good word to me to Keith Wyatt, who was then the head of the guitar department. And Keith's just a brilliant guy, lovely player and great bloke. And he got me up there to do a seminar. And the kids really dug it. And it was pretty tough because, I mean, when he introduced me, Nelson was just like kind of a laughingstock, really. I mean, it was a real shame because the image of the whole thing really undermined what I thought was some great melodic rock music.
Yeah, right.
Good pop music. And but Matt and Gunnar were caught up in this whole like the LA rock scene, you know, the glam rock sort of thing. And here's the interesting thing: they had this A&R guy, John Kolodner. And if you don't know who John Kolodner is, look him up. He's a piece of work. And if you look up the video for Aerosmith, Dude Looks Like a Lady, and there he is.
Okay,
you know,
yeah. And his name is on every record from back then.
He's a real character,
Yeah.
and he's actually a pretty cool guy, and had this really nasally voice, you know. He used to come into the studio, and I'd be in the middle of doing guitars, you know, and so I'm sitting there, and Mark Tanner, the producer's there, and Dave Thoner, the engineer's there, and here's Kolodner. He'd always come in with this incredibly beautiful girl hanging off his arm, you know, and he'd sit down and just hold court and listen, you know, and so he'd sit down and listen, and then they'd finish playing the track, and he'd say, if I hear one more guitar solo, I'll stop this record. And I'm sort of shrinking in my chair. But his vision for the band was to be the Eagles of the 90s, as he put it, which is interesting because to me that sort of says that he had his finger on the pulse that country rock, modern country, was going to be a thing. And he saw it probably 5-6 years before it really happened. And I really believe if Matt and Gunnar had taken the band down that path, then they would have been at the forefront of a new scene rather than at the end of an old scene. But how could you possibly know? I mean, as I've said, hindsight's 20/20, and at the time, they wanted to be Whitesnake and Winger and Rat and all the rest of it. So, which everybody did. Everyone was trying to be that.
Absolutely.
So, and they were trying to follow that path. But yeah, Kolodner was on the money. He and the sad thing is that if you actually look at the cover of the album, Matt and Gunnar are just dressed in jeans and acoustic guitars. It looks like a country rock record.
Yeah, right.
And the lineage of their father, Rick Nelson, like he was credited with starting the California sound and all that sort of thing. So it all ties in. But yeah, unfortunately, we went out in the trash with a lot of other bands from that hair metal era. And it, as I said, I just felt like it undermined what was a really good pop record.
Yep. I was actually named after their father.
Is that right?
I was.
Wow, well, there you go.
And I actually met Matthew and Nelson at NAMM, not the last year, but the year before. And I got to tell them that.
It's a shame I never met their dad because I only ever knew Rick Nelson as the singer. Mm-hmm. And whereas everybody knew him from the Nelsons, which was the TV show.
Okay.
And in America, I mean, that's an institution over there, that show. And I feel like he would have appreciated that. Oh, I thought, great, someone just knows me as the musician and not the actor. So
yeah, right. Yeah. So I asked you about the teaching, and one great thing now about trying to learn guitar is the fact that YouTube, there is videos everywhere. So you had the video out of your teaching, and one thing I got out of watching that on YouTube, because I didn't have it back in the day, was that your 4-note per string approach, whereas a lot of guys arrange their fast runs into 3-note per strings.
Well, that's all from Alan.
That's all from Alan
Holdsworth.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I read about that in an Alan Holdsworth interview. I would never have the brains to come up with that on my own. I mean, that was Alan's genius, and of course he had the hands to do it too. The big stretch. I've got tiny hands and crap stretch. I mean,
really,
absolutely. Yeah, I've no facility to play those massive chords, and so in a way, I feel better about explaining that to people because it's not from a genetic gift. It's if I can do it, anyone can do it because I'm more disadvantaged than most, I would feel. But that was Alan's idea to arrange strings four notes on scales, 4 notes on a string.
Yep.
Because it broke up patterns and got you away from that sort of stuff.
Yep.
When I first started to do it, I started to come up with a system for it, a pattern system, and that's when I realised, well, I'm defeating the purpose. Because that's how I got better at using chromatics as well, because I kept hitting so many wrong notes, I had to keep correcting myself.
Okay.
And because you're generally a half step away from what you want.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, the value here is the movement. It gives you movement around the fretboard, and it also makes you learn the fretboard because you haven't got your old faithful positions to go back to, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And but it took a long time, you know. But I realised early on it was something worth persevering with. So.
Yep. I did try and incorporate some of that into my own playing after seeing your video on that, and I couldn't get my fingers to do the stretch, and I actually have quite large hands, but just wouldn't gel with me. I went for many years not really using my pinky. I was one of these guys that played with the thumb over the top. And
gotcha. Yeah.
So when I try and approach more of a 4-note per string, I'm doing it as like a 3-note and then sliding it up one.
Whatever works.
Yeah. But
there's no rule that says you've got to use 4 fingers. I mean, heck, Greg Howe's got some of the biggest hands I've ever seen, and yet Greg does mainly these 3 fingers and uses his right hand to get those kind of runs.
Okay.
So,
yep.
And Red Beach would do it too, you know.
Yep.
The wild thing is TJ, who mainly keeps his left hand in a close sort of grip here and does a lot of wide interval stuff with his right hand because he plays the 2 hands on the neck. And yet I've seen TJ sit just casually like this with the guitar, and he can play a tritone across the entire neck, first position.
Wow.
So that's a three fret stretch. It's ridiculous. He's got massive hands and the biggest stretch. And we were talking about, I said, dude, I would give anything for your left hand. And he said, I don't even use it. He said he mainly keeps his left hand quite close.
Yeah.
For muting, I think, so because he doesn't use the hair tie thing or anything.
Yeah,
like
sure,
that.
sure.
Now it's funny how we all approach this thing, but there's no rule. I mean, whatever you imagine yourself doing, by any means necessary, go for it.
Yep. So I was going to ask you about your approach to the fretboard, because I'm the first to admit that I learnt my little box pentatonic shape. Oh, we're in A minor, I'm going to play at the 5th fret. Oh, we're in D minor, I'm going to go up to the 10th fret, etc. And it wasn't until the whole YouTube thing became very popular that I started seeing. I was playing in a Queen tribute band, and I'd take extended solos, and I'd have sort of improvise a bit. And as soon as I got out of my comfort zone, I started seeing videos of myself, and oh man, I'm lost. I'm hitting a lot of wrong notes. So I thought, it's never too late. Let's learn to navigate the whole fretboard. And I'd start asking people, what's your approach? And it really struck me that everybody's completely different. Some learn everything up on one string. Others are using the caged system. Others are 3-note per string. Do you have an approach that connects the dots?
I hear music in intervals. That's how I approach music. Is if someone shows me a scale, I don't take any notice of how they play it. All I want to know is, what are the sequence of intervals, whole step, half step, whole step,
Mm-hmm.
What is it? What's the formula for the scale? And that way you could learn it on one string. It doesn't really make any difference,
Sure.
And then the challenge of our instrument is developing that relationship across strings. And I remember, I'll just grab this guitar. I remember I taught a beginner at MI, and maybe I'm not back far enough, I don't know. And it was a lady, and she played a bit of piano, and she said, what's a half step on a guitar? And I said, well, it's that. And she said, oh, okay, so it's like a piano, just to the next key. And I said, yeah, the trouble is it's also that.
Yeah.
And she was astonished. She said, how can a half step go from being this little movement to this? And I said, yeah, welcome to the guitar,
Mm-hmm.
and then you add in open strings, and the possibilities just go out the window. So if you embrace that, you can use it. But it's a lot to learn, it's a lot of stuff to get over. But at the same time, like I said, you don't have to go that path. You can just, whatever the system is that you get that helps you express what you're feeling, then that's all that matters. It doesn't matter. Just because one person does something one way doesn't mean you're doing the wrong thing. There is no right or wrong. The minute you get past that whole concept right there, the whole world opens up to you, and you can just get on with the business of enjoying it.
Yep.
But the minute you start trying to sell your system as being better than someone else's, you've shut that door now. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it where we can do whatever we want. It's beyond judgment. Just enjoy yourself. We can do whatever we want, but my system's better than yours. Then,
Yeah, absolutely.
The minute you open yourself up to that, then you've blown it, because you'll get judged by everybody else, and they will have a valid reason for shooting you down. So, I like the other approach, where just chuck all the rules out, enjoy yourself, and see what happens at the other end.
Yep. So your approach to chromaticism is something that I took on board from seeing your videos on YouTube there, and not really something that I'd ever experimented with. And as soon as I did, people started saying to me, have you been listening to some jazz or something, mate? Have you picked up some jazz licks? It's like, no, I'm just learning to use the notes just on the other side of the correct notes and sliding in and rolling around them.
Yeah, just passing tones. I mean, and that was how my primitive head heard jazz. I didn't know any other scales. All I knew was just some basic modes, and I didn't even know what they were called. I didn't even know they were modes. Like I said, to me, I was trying to play a lot. I love Larry Carlton. Larry was one of my biggest turning points as a guitar player, and I remember trying to play along with one of Larry's tunes and quickly sort of found out, okay, it's in E. And I thought, well, see, I heard music as happy and sad. Major to me was happy.
Yep.
Minor was sad.
Yep.
And then Mixolydian, as I later found out, I determined was 2 beers happy. and Dorian, the Santana mode, was 2 beers sad. Just not quite as sad as sad, Aeolian.
Yep.
And Mixolydian wasn't quite as blatantly sunshiny happy as Major, you know. It was just a little bit on a little bit wobbly, you know.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Lydian personally, but it's very hard to play. Very hard to play Lydian and not sound like you're trying to sound like Steve Vai.
Right. Yeah. Or David Gilmour, for that matter.
Yeah.
Who, was Lydianing me long before Steve Vai did.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Steve loves Lydian. He leans on that a lot. You know, and does it beautifully. So that's what I mean. You've got to find your own way to express yourself, other than. I'd say if you find yourself going, well, I can't play Lydian unless if I play Lydian, I sound like Steve Vai, then I would say find a rhythm or a groove that is so far from anything Steve Vai would play.
Okay.
And choose a sound that is unlike anything Steve Vai would play.
Yep.
And do not do any which is what Steve Vai always does. And, and don't get me wrong, I love it, but don't do that.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
I think Wayne Krantz said it, where he just I forget who Wayne said he was a huge fan of, like. And he said, you just have to walk away from it. If you're ever going to find yourself, you've got to walk away from it. And in a way, I had to do that with Alan, because the one thing lucky with Alan Holdsworth is that he's such a genius, way beyond anything my lizard brain could ever come close to getting to, that there's no hope of me ever copying him, because I don't know what he's doing. We'll never know.
Sure.
And all I had to do was really embrace all the sounds and the influences I had before I heard Alan, which was blues rock, which was the 70s, you know.
Yep.
Before I heard Larry Carlton and Alan, I would have been happy being Mick Ralphs from Bad Company, you know, or Brian Robertson from Thin Lizzy. I mean, that's the sound I was really going for. And then Larry got me started, and then Alan just finished it off, and Eddie Van Halen, you know, so, I mean, all I had to do was really embrace that sound again. And then the slide playing, of course, that's just another universe. Then I could just stop playing all the diddly-widdly stuff and just play slide for the rest of my life, and I'd have my thing.
I'm going to come back to the slide, because that's a whole different topic with you. But
is a bathroom break built into this live
You know what?
broadcast?
You know what? I'm going to start doing that. I actually rang a couple of friends after my last one and said, these generally go for 2 hours. I think at the 1 hour mark, I should get people to come and do a little live performance here and use those. If you'd like to go take one, please by all means. Yep.
Yeah.
And I will try and keep
talk
them
amongst yourselves, all right?
Yeah. I'm going to read some comments and things. So it's not just me, folks. It does happen. Now, I'm going to bring up, and I'll bring this up again when Brett comes back, but he mentioned Larry Carlton, and something for me that I learnt was using Motifs, and I got that from a Larry Carlton video on truefire.com, a paid for teaching site. And what he meant by Motifs was listening around to the band. Someone will play a cool little lick. They might go, ba-da, ba-dum. And you go, okay, cool. I'm going to take that. Ba-da, ba-dum, ba-da, ba-dum, ba-da, 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 ba-dum, and making melodies, not just going widdly diddly for no reason. The first time I ever tried that, I was playing with my friend Mikey, who I've played in bands with for 30 years. And he's come up to me, I've gone to use that concept. And straight away, he's just, excuse the French, but just looked at me and just go, oh, fuck me, what was that? I was like, Larry Carlton taught me something there, Motifs, and it's a very big thing. So I'm going to ask Brett what other things he got from Larry Carlton. But I'm also going to pick his brains about his slide playing, because he's a different player when he puts that slide on, and he can go from that beautiful legato stuff to just the most beautiful melodies. Most of the stuff on John Farnham is him playing with a slide, and the melodies that he comes out with is absolutely beautiful. Have we still got people in the chat room? If so, make yourself known. And there's a few comments there that I will read out to Brett, and I can hear that he's coming back.
I'm back.
Yeah,
Yes.
mate,
Ah,
mate. I just went on a bit of a rant then. You mentioned Larry Carlton.
yeah.
And on the TrueFire site a couple of years ago, I paid for a year's subscription on that. And I was just saying to the folks that he had a thing called blues motifs, and he explained his use of motifs of you're stuck for ideas, listen to the guys in the band. Someone will play a little doodly-doon, and you go, thank you, I'll take that. Doodly-doon, 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 and how that really opened up a melodic sense in my playing. What is that something that you would use, and have you picked up anything else from Larry Carlton that you'd like to share with people?
Man, well, Larry. So here's the thing. Guitar Player magazine. Once again, the first issue I ever got had Jose Feliciano on the cover, and which was kind of cool because I actually was a Jose Feliciano fan. My brother had his live album,
Yeah.
and so that got heavy rotation along with everything else. And but the other cool thing in that issue was the guy Barry. Can't remember his name. He played lead guitar for the Atlanta Rhythm Section. Great guitar player,
Yeah?
Beautiful player. Yeah, he was a real hot picker too, like a great sound. Like, and then the second issue I got had Larry Carlton on the cover, and I remember talking to my brother-in-law Wayne. Wayne McKay is my brother-in-law. He's a fantastic drummer, and Wayne's influence on me is profound. Like his album record collection is something I would just pour through. And you wouldn't believe some of the gems I found in there.
Cool.
And of course, he was a massive Crusaders fan. And he said, Larry Carlton, yeah, it's Steely Dan, Crusaders. God, come on, get into him. And so I just happened to be in the record store, local record store, and here is the very first Larry Carlton album, the one with Room 335 on it. And that's the album he was talking about. And I think he just released Strikes Twice when he did this interview. So I found that one later. But yeah, this album, I brought it home and put it on. And the thing that hit me about Larry was here's a guy with obvious heavy jazz harmonic sense, but with a rock tone.
Yep.
And the ability to use a rock and blues sound and feel, but with just notes I'd never heard coming out. Not like that. Not
Yep.
the way he did it.
Yep.
And his phrasing completely captured me. This is before I'd heard Alan and Scott Henderson and all these other people that would come along later on. But I remember TJ and I were hanging out one day. This was like 92 when we were working on our first album together, and he said, I've never heard any. We were talking. Larry must have come up again, He said, I've never heard any Larry Carlton. I said, we've got to go. We've got to go up to Tower Records and get the album,
Yep.
So we walked up to Tower Records on Sunset and bought that album. Brought it home and put it on. As soon as the solo came on, he just looked at me and went, He just realised, I got your number, pal. Here's where all your stuff comes from. And yeah, it was pretty self-evident that my phrasing was all nicked from Larry. Just changed everything for me.
Yep.
So really, like I said, I didn't have the brains to go through Larry's harmony. You have to understand, like, after those 4 lessons I took from Jeff here in town, I was self-taught. That was it.
Okay.
It was putting the needle back and forth on all my LPs and ruining them.
Yep.
And I studied classical guitar with a great player named Don Charlton when I was 17. I did that for about a year. And Don was great. He was a younger guy who loved Eric Clapton, but he was great. He got me into classical guitar and taught me how to read music. I suck at it now, but I got pretty good back then.
Cool.
And I even managed to figure out a few John Williams, the guitar player, not the composer.
Yep.
A few John Williams pieces by ear, which is, I still can't believe I did it.
Wow.
I learned Gavotte entirely by ear. Took all day, and yeah, it was hard, but sucked at playing it. But I did figure it out. But yeah, I couldn't analyze harmony because I didn't know what harmony was. Unfortunately, classical guitar doesn't teach you about harmony. You're playing some of the best you'll ever hear, but you don't know what it is. You don't learn chord voicings. You don't learn the scales that go with those chords. I tried to find a jazz teacher, but there was none around. I looked, and there were no other players in town that could help me because we were all flying blind. We didn't know what we were doing. And so it wasn't until I went to the States and met TJ that we were jamming, and he said, He said, you really like playing in Mixolydian a lot. And I said, I do. And he said, you don't know what that is? And I said, no, I have no idea. And he played me the scale, and I went, the Larry Carlton scale. You know, that was the one where I was trying to figure out how to play on Larry's song.
Yep.
And I went, well, it sounds happy, so I played a major scale, and I went, oh, no. Okay, so don't hit a D sharp, hit a D natural.
Mm-hmm.
So without realising it, I learned how to target an interval and play modally. So that's how I thought. I thought play all the things you would play in E major, but play the flat 7.
Okay.
And that's how my head works when I play music, you know.
Yep.
I don't play, like if I play I don't play modes where I play a major scale in another key to match a chord. I play from the root of the chord and the sequence of intervals that sit in that chord. So, you know, if I play the altered scale, I don't play melodic minor a half step up. I play half step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step. You know?
So I'm the other approach, whereas I'm thinking, well, that we're playing in B, but there's an A and an E chord in there, so really it's an E. I'm going to solo like I'm an E, but the root note that we're playing around is B.
Yeah,
so that's more
valid.
Yeah.
They're all valid, and as long as you can stay in touch with melody, then it's all good, you know. But it's just how my brain works. I can't help it. I keep getting drawn back to the tonic, and then I've got to start from there. And unfortunately, I can't. It's kind of one of these, and I'm no good at it. So and it does frustrate me. I wish I could do the other way, but yeah, Larry was the guy that really hit me with phrasing, and also with the way he just wove a line through changes. You know, like it was. I thought, God, I'd love to be able to do that. You know?
Well, it's funny because I mentioned to you I'm good friends with Louis Shelton, and he was around one time. We were working on a little video thing for him, and
Larry spoke volumes about Louis.
Yeah,
you know,
they're good friends, and we watched a little video on Larry, and he was talking about his approach and how, to me, it was very mathematical. And I remember turning to Louis and going, "Is this how you approach things?" And he just looked at me and said, no, totally not. He's just sort of using his ear, and he said, nah, man, that's too much thinking for me. But yeah, I wanted to bring up the slide playing for you because as much as we saw in that little clip that I played earlier, your chromatic, your legato, your all that type of playing is just amazing. With Farnham, most of those iconic solos were with slide guitar, and it seems like almost when you're given, I'm going to use the word restriction. It's probably not a restriction, but it's just another medium to play with of having a slide on your finger. Man, the melodies you come out with those solos are just beautiful, man. Just how did you get into the whole slide playing? Was that something that came naturally?
Oh no,
no.
I don't think slide playing comes naturally for anybody.
I sound like a dead cat. I sound like a dead cat.
I remember reading a Dwayne Allman interview, and he said that when he first started doing it, he said the rest of the band would look at each other and go, "Oh no, he's going to do it again." And I thought, well, there it is. You know, if the best in the world, one of the best that's ever lived, went through that, we all go through it. So, yeah, I remember watching Countdown back in the day. I couldn't have been any more than about 14, I think. And Little River Band had just released a song called Every Day of My Life, and Rick Formosa was playing this beautiful slide. I think Rick was a big Lowell George fan from Little Feat, and loved Rick Formosa's playing. I always tried to figure out what his kind of background was. I've never met him, and I've done a lot of work with Graham Goebel, and Graham said, yeah, Rick was a Lowell George fan. So I thought, that sort of helps me understand where he works, how his brain works. But then, you know, Rick's also an amazing orchestrator, so there's an amazing mind laying his hands on that guitar. So, but I just loved it, and I thought, this is brilliant. I got to get me one of those. So I went to the local music shop and bought a chrome one, and came home, and it looked so easy, and it was so bad. It was just awful. And I remember I just sort of went, well, that's the end of that, threw it away, you know. And much later, I was talking to that guy I mentioned before, Glenn Quilly. And Quilly he's about 10 years older than me, and he introduced me to some of the greatest stuff. Like Quilly introduced me to the Blues Breakers album and Allman Brothers, and, you know, so many great things came from talking to Quilly. And he said, "Well," he said, "of course you sound like crap." He said, "Your guitar, you got to tune your guitar to a chord." And because I was playing the Strat with the whammy bar, I had to buy a cheap Les Paul copy, and I tuned it to open. I think it was open A, but no, I tuned it to open E. That's right, open E, and that was much better. And then, of course, I saw this live clip of Joe Walsh. This is before I even bought the guitar. I saw this live clip of Joe Walsh doing Rocky Mountain Way, where he took the regular guitar off and put the slide guitar on.
Uh-huh.
And that's when I noticed Joe wore it on his second finger, the finger.
Okay.
And I just thought, okay, well, I guess that's the finger you wear it on, because I think Rick was wearing it on his third finger, but that's why it ended up on this finger. And so I was playing in open E, and I really loved that relationship between the second string and the third string, where you have the it's a major third fifth interval, you know, which is because the G string's a half step up kind of thing. And eventually I developed enough control muting wise where I could keep the thing quiet and have it just do what I wanted it to do. And went back to standard tuning, but I really missed that third interval. And because I had it on the middle finger, I just thought, I wonder if it'd work. So I just angled it like that, and I could get the interval again. So I went, oh, happy days. Great. So, you know, off I went. So, yeah. So yeah, that's sort of the beginning of the whole slide guitar thing. But I just look, it was just a series of events where I just happened to catch Rory Gallagher on the Old Grey Whistle Test one night on the ABC, and that was life-changing, you know, just to see Rory like that. It was one of the greatest performances I've ever seen, and I was lucky enough to grab a cassette because I could record the ABC through my FM radio.
Oh, nice.
Onto my cassette deck, and managed to get a large bulk of the show. And yeah, I just lived and breathed that for decades. I mean, I just love Rory. I just did on my YouTube channel, I just did a version of Walk on Hot Coals as a sort of a tribute to Rory. So
nice one.
So, yeah,
nice one. So you mentioned that different interval. I went to use that finger, but you said this one, and angling it somewhat to get different intervals that most people wouldn't get. Did that take a while to get that down?
Oh yeah. It's still something I got to work on. You know, it's like it's still a bit touch and go. You know, it's not an exact science. But look, slide playing to me is like singing. Like if you don't do it, your pitch goes. You know, like the more slide I play, the better my pitch gets. So that's why you hear the great slide players, and you know, there's never even a question of you Sonny Landreth or Derek Trucks or David Lindley or anyone. Sure. You know, you name one.
Yep. And
there's never even an issue. It's just beautiful and perfect, you know. And with me, it's like it's a bit dodgy, you know. So
well, you said the magic word there with Derek Trucks. That's one slide player that I go, man, you sound like a woman singing. It's a beautiful thing to hear him play.
You know, I jammed with Derek when he was 15.
Oh, really? Yeah,
TJ and I had a band, a fusion band back in 95. 94, 95, I think. And we were trying to get a spot at the NAMM show where we could play with our band. And we were endorsing Hughes and Kettner at the time. And we asked them if they had anything going on. And they said, well, we don't. But they said, Washburn have got a big show. And they said, we do know, they must have known people there. And they said, they need a band to back this young guy named Derek Trucks. Would you guys do it? And we said, yeah, we'd love to, you know. And they said, yeah, you could play a couple of your tunes and then Derek could get up and play with you. And I knew straight away, I thought, Derek Trucks. I said, I wonder if he's in relation to Butch Trucks from the Allman Brothers, because it's an unusual name. And I found out that was his uncle. Butch was his uncle. And TJ and I met Derek in the afternoon with his father. And he was only 15. And his dad was just great. Derek was very quiet. He just sort of pretty much said hello, and that was it, you know. And his dad was a great guy, and we're having a big chat, and saying, yeah, he's off into Miles Davis and John Coltrane, all sorts of stuff. It's incredible. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. And so we we played a couple of our tunes at the Washburn show, and then Derek got up with us, and we just played a blues. We didn't know what else to do, and I don't think Derek cared, so we just played a blues. And I just remember looking at him going, man, he's a great slide player. He'll be great,
Yep.
But back then, he was very much in the Dwayne Allman mold of just, that's what he sounded like. He sounded like a young Dwayne,
Yeah.
And then 10 years later, I was 2004. I was in America doing some stuff again, and I went into MI to do some guest teaching, a bit of open counselling, and I noticed on the wall there was a sign saying tonight the Derek Trucks Band, and I went, oh wow, this would be great. Hear the young fella again, see what he's been doing,
Yep.
So I go down there, and I remember sitting there and just going, this is what it must have been like to walk into a club and hear Jimi Hendrix for the first time. It was religious. It was biblical. It was unbelievable. I thought it was, and it wasn't even like, if Derek had just stood there and played, it would have been like that. But then to hear him with that band and the way they just breathed with each other, it was otherworldly.
Wow. So
yeah,
Brett,
ever since then, I've been just a Derek Trucks disciple. So, yeah.
Brett, before we started, I told you that I'm having issues with my interface that decides to go up and down without me touching anything. You did see me change the battery in my camera just before, but folks, thank you for letting me know that my mic dropped. Is that any better? I know there's a slight delay before you can actually let me know, but I'm looking.
Sound fine to me.
It sounds fine to you? Yeah.
Yeah,
mate, this is the last time I'm going straight down to the shop and getting a new interface. There's nothing in the stores at the moment because of the current situation, which has been very frustrating. That's why I can't get a battery adapter for my camera. But until anybody lets me know any differently, I hope I'm not distorting now because that would really piss me off. But just you're talking about Derek being so good at a young age, and it's like Joe Bonamassa. Like, I knew of him when he was 14 years old. A lot of people, if you've got it, you know it at that young age. Now it's distorting. I'm being told, okay, that'd be right. Okay, how's that, Linko? I'm just going to go back a bit. It's really annoying, really annoying. Hopefully that's okay. Keep letting me know, guys, as I'm talking, because it's been a bane of my existence lately, is my little interface here. So yeah, just saying, someone like Joe Bonamassa, absolutely kicking ass at a young age. When you were young, and you were saying about learning all the Deep Purple stuff, do you think you would, if you listened back now, you'd pick that it's the same style? You'd maybe just.
Well, I was dreadful at a young age.
Really?
Yeah, and there's a reason for that. It's just the lack of information. I remember picking up Duke magazine. I don't know if you remember that. There were two trade papers around when I was young, Duke and Ram, and they were just your standard Australian rock trade papers, and they told you what was going on out there in the world. And I picked up a copy of Duke magazine, and I was 14, and they were talking about the band Feather, which had a very young Stuart Fraser in it at 16 years old. And there's a picture. Swanee, John Swan was the singer. I think Stuart's brother, Warwick, played drums, I think.
Really?
And I remember I eventually caught them on Countdown doing a song called Girl Trouble. And I was just going, oh, my God, if this is what your average 16-year-old sounds like, I'm dead in the water. Stuart had this excitement to his notes that I just couldn't figure out. I was like, why don't my notes sound like that? What is he doing? I couldn't see. So then I'm watching Countdown once again. They were doing something like AC/DC came on. They were doing something like High Voltage, I think. And it's right at the very end of the song. And it was probably a mime. I don't even know. But it was right at the very end of the song. Angus is hamming it up. And he hits this low note like a G on the low E string and shoves the guitar right in the camera. And I could see his left hand wobbling the string like that.
Yep.
And I went, you've got to wobble the string. Mate, you've got to wobble the string. That's vibrato. I didn't even know what vibrato was. No one told me. No one taught me about vibrato. They weren't included in the 4 lessons I had, I was wondering why when I just hit a note or even bent up to it, it didn't sound exciting. That's what Stuart was doing. He had vibrato, good vibrato.
Yep.
And I went, and that was life-changing. I mean, this is This just shows you the universe we're living in now with everything at our fingertips on YouTube. I mean, you can learn what would have taken me 5 years to learn, someone can learn in literally 5 minutes on YouTube. Vibrato was a mystery. I remember the day I held a note and then bent the lower note up a whole step to unison with it, and heard the two of them together and went, oh my God, that's how you do that, you know. The ability to bend a string and then do a pull-off. Like Brian May was doing a lot of it. It took me months to figure it out and then another 6 months to perfect it. You know, these are just dumb things that you'll learn. Like I never got those lessons. Like when Jeff was teaching me those first guitar lessons, he was just showing me how to navigate a fretboard, like how to actually hold a pick and play a guitar. Like we never got any further than that. But now it's all on YouTube. You want to learn how to do some of the most complex things in the world, there is close-up footage and tab and notation.
Absolutely.
Either by the artists themselves or by someone who knows what they're doing. I mean, you want to know what those Halen and Holdsworth chords are with the harmonizer settings? I can find a clip that'll show me how to do it. You know, it's like, it's a different, this is why we've got such great young players, because they carved decades off the learning process. Whereas back then for us, it was like needle, LP, ruining, scratching, unplayable, dead. And then, there's just a shot that there's going to be some sort of music on one of those 2 channels I can get here in the bush, you know. And I might get to, and it was usually Countdown. I thought I might get to see something. Remember the first time Van Halen were on Countdown doing You Really Got Me? I'm sitting there like this waiting through every horrible new wave, rotten disco song. And then all of a sudden out of nowhere, this guy's standing there playing this Explorer. And I'm going, what's this? And then by the time it gets to the solo, I've caught this glimpse of something. Something happened, you know, that involved this. And then it was gone. And I went, they repeat this show next Saturday. So I had to wait till next Saturday, and I'm sitting there with my cassette player, and I recorded it, because I didn't even know what the band was called. I didn't even catch their name. And so I've recorded it, and I've looked at it, and then I've gone into town and bought the album, brought it home, and now I've got Eruption to listen to, and I've just had to sit there and go, how would he do it? How would you do that? It had something to do with this hand. And I nutted it out, you know. Whereas, it's like the age we live in now. You want to learn anything, you just go look it up.
I think the problem with it being so accessible now, though, is that back then, when we were trying to work stuff out ourselves, we weren't getting it exactly the way they were doing it. We were coming up with our own thing. Whereas now everyone's like, oh, no, he uses this finger and he anchors this or whatever. Well, but what's you? Where's you?
Right.
You know? So
and you has got to be contained within 2 bars. It can't be like, I've got this technique where I play with my nose, you know, like on my elbow, or it's not about that. Because that gets you through one thing, you know. It's got to be in the touch, in the way you touch the instrument and the way you choose the sound that expresses you. Like I'm so lucky that people have told me they can hear me within 10 notes, you know, 5 notes.
And that's so hard to come up with that identifiable thing.
It's the thing.
It is.
It is
absolutely.
The thing. Everything else doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many chops you've got. It doesn't matter how fast you can play in the grand scheme of things. Without that, you're a walking gimmick, you know. And I'm sorry, that is the hard truth of it. And the sad thing is, I believe it's in everybody. I've sat in a room at MI with 10 guys in a room all jamming, and I've said to them, I remember saying to them all one day at the end of our little session, I said, you know, I could pick every single one of you guys in a blindfold test, just based on your vibrato, just based on how you play into a note and out of it. Those nuances are in all of us, you know. You don't have to play the exotic scales or anything. You've got it. Just let it happen, you know.
You said it before with Angus Young. Man, he's got that. It's like he's nervous. It's so quick. But one note, and you know it's him.
You know it's Angus, yeah.
My first guitar heroes, Hank Marvin was the first thing that I started learning to play, but then Mark Knopfler, the whole Brothers in Arms era. It was around
Sure.
about the time when I saw you on TV with doing the Whispering Jack concerts.
Well, I mean, I got it. Sultans of Swing. I got it then.
Man,
so,
he plays one note, and I just go, "That's Mark Knopfler."
Yeah, sure.
Man, I interviewed Rick Brewster the other day, and I kid you not, about an hour later, I went into JB Hi-Fi and I walked in, and there was a solo playing on the stereo, and I didn't know the song, and I went, that can't be Rick Brewster. That sounds just like Rick Brewster. And then the vocals came in, and it was Doc Neeson. I went, and it happened to be a best of.
Well, I mean, my cousin's band, back last year when there used to be gigs, they just play in one of the local pubs, and they're a really good heavy rock band, and they play a lot of Angels tunes, and sometimes I'll fill in for them. And yeah, one of my greatest pleasures is whenever they play an Angels tune, they get to play one of Rick's solos, because they're just majestic compositions, all in themselves.
Absolutely,
they're so beautifully written.
Yep.
That you just do the song a disservice to not play them.
Yep.
I consider it sacrilege to improvise something. Why would you? It's like, so yeah.
I did say that to Rick, that there's no way that I could play No Secrets, for instance, and not play that solo.
You're like playing something and not playing George Harrison's solo.
Exactly.
How could you do that?
Yeah. And he was saying that comes from singing out loud what he wanted to hear, and running with that rather than trying to show off chops, which there are guys who can connect the dots. You can have the right chordal tones and everything. And I don't mind it when there's that bit of liquid in between, or, the string lines in the 70s on TV shows was a classic for it, where you had the to get to a certain thing. And that's great.
Love Theme by Barry White, listen to that. So
yeah.
Look, I love chops, obviously,
Yeah.
One of the biggest abusers of them in the past, anyway.
Yep.
And much to my detriment, because once you establish yourself as a shredder, there's no going back. No amount of me posting clips of slide playing is ever going to undermine the fact that people think I'm just a shredder, and there's nothing I can do about that.
Yep.
And and I love technique, but it's just that the technique has to be connected by identity. Yngwie is not a great guitar player because of his chops. It's because his personality is in there. Steve Vai, it's his personality is in that technique. You know what I mean? Yep. It's like it can't just be a succession of notes beautifully played with precision, which is what shred is. That's what it is. But it's when you combine that with an incredible personality. Paul Gilbert,
he's gotten so good as he's gotten older. Like, in his younger days, it was all the 3-note per string, but where he's taking it now and kind of walking away from that a bit, but then
playing a lot of slide,
just really nice bluesy kinds of things. But then knowing that he's got that to fall back onto, that at any time he can just rip your head off.
Vicious right hand. But no, it's just I don't mean to sort of say it in any way like the chops are bad. That's ridiculous. The more technique you got, the better. Man, I love watching these guys play but they've also got personality.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm saying. You've got to, and that's just as simple as sitting back and letting it come out. Like you've got it in you, just let it happen. Phil Buckle was the guy. When people used to come up to me in the pubs, when we were just in our pub band, they'd walk up to me, because no one had ever heard the people I was listening to. No one even heard Eddie Van Halen back then. This is before Jump and before Beat It, And they definitely never heard of Halen and Holdsworth. And so they're walking up to me, and they'd never seen anyone do this, and they'd never heard anyone play the legato stuff like that I was trying to copy from Alan. They say, "You're the greatest guitar player I've ever seen. I've never seen anybody do that." And I'd say, "Well, I copied these two guys, Eddie Van Halen and Halen Holdsworth. You ever heard of them?" And they go, "No." And I'd say, "Well, here, I'll write their names down." So I'd grab a coaster and I'd write it give it to them. They'd sort of look at me and wander off. And I remember I was down at Soundworks in Ringwood near Melbourne. Paul Gale was fixing my gear, and while he was fixing it, sometimes I'd wander down the street to Helmet's Music, which was just down the street. It was a store down the street, and I'd go in there and just play guitars and muck about. And I remember I went down to this back room they had and had a sign up, no stairway to heaven, you know, no smoke on the water. And I was like, bloody hell, tough room, you know. So I plugged into this amp and got a guitar and had it really low. You could barely hear the guitar above someone talking. And I'm just down there noodling about, as I do. And this head comes around the corner. And unbeknownst to me, it was Phil Buckle.
Wow.
And I'd been in the store like a week earlier, same deal, only I wasn't playing, and Phil was demonstrating a guitar to somebody. And he was doing the harmonics technique that Tommy Emmanuel's famous for,
Yep.
Lenny Brew, you know, that sort of style of thing. And I remember just going, who's this guy, you know? I didn't even know who he was. And this guy's head comes around the corner. And I went, oh, my God, am I playing too loud? Am I playing too loud? And he said, no, you're fine. He said, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, play. And I did my shtick, you know. And he said, wow, that's really interesting, you know. And I said, oh, well, I copied these two guys. I started doing the spiel. I was looking for a beer coaster to write their names on,
Yep.
you know. And Phil said, I know who those two guys are. He said, what are you? You're doing something else. You got something else going on here. And that was the first time anyone had ever said that to me. Like Phil, it was the first time I'd ever met a guitar player. I still didn't even know the magnitude of the guitar player I just met in Phil Buckle. Like,
Yeah.
what a genius.
Absolutely.
But he was the first. It was the first time anyone had said, I know who Eddie Van Halen and Halen and Holdsworth are. I know they're playing. You've got something else. And I walked out of there like going, I've got something else, you know. There's something of me in there. That stuff that I used to listen to when I'd try to copy Eddie and I'd try to copy Alan, and this other thing would come out, and I'd just sit there and go, I'm useless. I can't do this. I'm getting it wrong. And it's like, well, actually, you're getting it right. You know, you're being yourself. You know, the fact that you can't copy them is a blessing. Don't try to copy them.
Absolutely.
Be influenced by them, get it wrong, and keep the wrong and make it yours. You know, and that's what we should do. You know,
Totally. Now you mentioned Phil Buckle, and when you did have a bit of a hiatus from the John Farnham Band, you were replaced with two guys, being Phil Buckle and Jack Jones, also known as Erwin Thomas.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, those guys, when they were playing your solos, I don't recall them ever trying to do it with a slide. They would sort of just play. You standard.
I don't know I know Phil does play slide. I know Jack. Well, I know Jack as Erwin now, but I knew him as Jack back then.
Yep.
In fact, I introduced Jack to John. I met Jack. Oh, it was before he'd met John.
Yep.
And it was just, you know, I remember we hung out for a while, and I just remember sitting there going, I should quit playing guitar right now and manage this guy.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
Because, you know, just I thought, you know, sign him up, someone.
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
But anyway, it happened anyway.
Yep.
So. But I know Erwin doesn't play slide. He probably can. I'm sure he can. Let's face it. If it's got strings on it, Erwin can kill it.
Yep.
But it's just probably not his thing. You know, he doesn't have a connection to it. I just play slide in such a weird way. Like that's me, isn't it? You know, like everything's just not quite there, is it? Like, I mean, people would look at me, they'd look at the hybrid picking thing and go, oh, so you can play all that country and western stuff, you know? And it's like, no, can't. No, Danny Gatton, no, can't do any of that. You know, Scotty Anderson, no, can't do any of that. I just do my thing, you know?
So
and it's like the slide playing, they'd be like, oh, so you could, you know, I could give you a dobro and you could play like some Delta blues, and no, can't do any of that. Any you know, Robert Johnson, no, got none of that. Dwayne Allman, no, useless.
Yep.
I just do my thing. You know?
Are you any good at playing solo pieces? I know if someone gives me a guitar and says, play me something, I'm like,
crap.
Do you want to like, give me some music to play over? Because I don't know many pieces.
Total crap. I grew up in a band,
Yeah.
you know, like I grew up in a band. That's how I learned how to play, was with a guitar, bass, drums,
Yep.
singer. People give me a guitar to this day and say, entertain us. And I'm like, I don't know. What do you want to hear? I'll play some scales for you if you like.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
no, I'm not a solo performer. And if I could sit and play a couple of acoustic things, just not very well, but I don't want to be. I have no desire to be that guy, you know. I don't want to be. I like being in bands, and the thing is, the bigger the band, the better. If someone puts me in a band and says, your job is to sit up the back here and play little rhythm bits all night, I'm like, love it. I'm there,
Yep.
you know. It's not like, let me down the front, you guys. I've got to show everybody how amazing I am, you know. It's like, I hate being down the front. I'm not that guy. I like being in the middle of something big. I would have been a really good second violinist or something.
Sure,
you know?
sure. And
I love being part of a big picture.
it's funny you should say that because I had the weirdest day the other day where I mentioned I went into JB Hi-Fi and they were playing the Angels, and all that day it seemed everybody that I had been interviewing over the last few weeks, couple of months, their music was just following me everywhere. And I went to a friend's place. I just got my new laptop and it was like, oh, you've got yours, I got mine. We can hang out and keep working on stuff. And she had Foxtel going, one of the music channels, and Two Strong Hearts came on. And there's you, well, filmed on the Gold Coast, which is where I'm from, and out the front of the Miami Ice. Yeah, which is now gone.
Ice, yeah.
That's been knocked down.
Oh, is it gone?
It's gone.
Wow.
That was been there since I was a little kid. I always remember it being there. But there's now a residential high-rise there, which is called, funnily enough, Miami Ice. It's still called Miami
Well,
Ice.
they kept the name.
They kept the name, yeah. But what got me was in that you were standing behind the drummer. Angus, you weren't down the front going, hey, I'm Brett Garsed, check me out down the front. No, just like you were saying, you well, everyone else is sort of not vying for the camera, but you were almost shying away from it, quite content to hang behind Angus there.
I mean, look, I will do it if it's required, because a lot of times it is required. It's like, you've got to go down the front and do this. And then I've done my own gigs where it's been me fronting the show sort of thing, if I may say that. And look, it's fun and everything. I'll do it my way. I'm just a bit goofy and how you going, but yeah, I have no desire to do it. If I can do it and it's effective, then that's fine, and I'm happy to do it, and I will enjoy it. But it's not a driving ambition. It's not like I have to get all the solos and I have to do this. I actually did a tour with Paul Stanley many years ago, back in 2008. Yeah, well, Paul Merkovich, the keyboard player from the Nelson Band, a bit of a long story, but hey, we've got time. Yep. It's, Paul was on this show called Rockstar. Remember NXS did a show where they were looking for a lead singer, and they had this incredible house band with my friend Rafael Morea was playing guitar. I met Rafael when I was at MI, and Paul was the MD of the house band, and they were just ballistically good. And they did a second one with Gilby Clarke and Jason Newsted and someone else, I can't remember. And Tommy Lee, that's right, how could I forget? And Paul Stanley was watching this show, and he said, I didn't care about who they were looking for. I just wanted the house band. He grabbed the band and used them to record an album. And they had a fantastic rhythm guitar player whose name I cannot remember, and I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember his name because he was a gun player and an incredible singer. And he couldn't do it, this Australian leg of the tour, because he had to do something else. And Paul asked me if I'd do it.
Cool.
And Paul Stanley, I got to say, is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. He's just beautiful guy.
Is that right?
Really. And lovely guy. Yeah, just an absolute legend. Just wonderful fella. And prior to this, when I was learning the material, I was in England doing some guitar clinics. And I did one one where I met up with Paul Cornford and James Cornford, father and son of Cornford Amps, and we went into London that night, and I said, is there any chance, because I knew they knew Guthrie, of course, because Guthrie was using the Cornford amps, and I said, can we hook up with Guthrie? And they said, yeah, he's in town. So it was great. I got to meet Guthrie.
Oh, nice.
And it was brilliant. We went out and had a curry and got hammered. It was just fantastic. And I remember Guthrie said, so what are you doing, and what's going on? And I said, I'm going to do a tour with Paul Stanley of Kiss. I said, yeah, I'm playing rhythm guitar. And Guthrie said, you're playing rhythm guitar? Did someone miss a meeting? Beautiful God. He's so funny. He's just a gem. And I'd said, no, Rafael Morea's playing lead guitar. It's in good hands, trust me. And I was so happy to just stand there and play power chords all night. I had so much fun loved it. I said, this is my new career. I could do this all night, you know. And Raphael just killed it, just went out the front and laid waste to the joint. And I just really enjoyed that. Like just being in a band, fulfilling a role and enjoying being there. I mean, you know, it's not about the solo. It's just, for me, it's, even though I'm known for just being the solo guy, you know, I love working with other guitar players, and I was so lucky I got to work with Stuart Fraser for 25 years, you know, and it was like a masterclass in how to be a musician, you know. And
well, Stuart was a very big influence on me. When I first started working out songs by ear, those Noiseworks solos were easy. That was the kind of thing I could work out. Like, it didn't have all the fast, but I could, I could see those little shapes that he's doing there. And
he could do it. He just didn't. When he did, it was like a shock.
Really?
And, Stuart was, there was sides to his playing that he's one of the greatest acoustic players I've ever seen. He was very capable of doing all the boom chick stuff. Chet Atkins, Tommy Emmanuel.
Yep.
I mean, he would hear some Doyle Dykes tune in some strange alternate tuning, and within an hour he'd figured it out and he could play it. He was just one of the most naturally amazing musicians I've ever been in a room with.
Wow,
you know?
Wow, cool.
Unbelievable, yeah. Like, I was a huge Noiseworks fan long before I met him.
Yep.
And, I just felt so incredibly blessed that I got to become such good friends with him.
Yep.
What a loss.
That damn C word, mate. It's,
Exactly.
Yeah, too much of it, and actually pretty close to home at the moment as well, but I'll move on from that. You mentioned your hybrid picking, and I saw that on the video, the you be playing with a pick, but then when you're going to skip strings, your finger will just pop out and grab that.
Well, it's how I sweep pick, you know.
Yep.
It's like the turning point was, Phil, once again, you know.
I was going to say Phil. I saw him.
Phil worked at Soundworks for a while when I used to go there and get my gear fixed, and Soundworks had a sort of a retail section for a while in the late 80s. And so I walked in there one day with my gear to get repaired, and Phil had a video on, and it was Vinnie Moore, and he was doing his first instructional thing, and he did this thing. And I went, oh my God, what was that? And Phil said, that's called a sweep arpeggio. I said, I've never seen anything like that before. That is unbelievable. And Phil said, well, maybe you should take this home and listen and have a look at it. And he gave me Frank Gambale's first instructional video.
Yep.
So I went home and just watched that and went, my God, well, that's, you know, let's face it. Frank will just, you know, wipe the smile off your face in nothing flat. I was just gobsmacked at what I was seeing and hearing. And then, much to my shock, because I'd never seen anyone arrange notes the way Frank did across strings. All my thinking was kind of this way, like along the fretboard, because I didn't have any alternate picking facility, and still don't really. I'm crap. But so I just had to mainly, if I was going to do an arpeggio, I'd skip strings, you know, get the intervals that way. And I'd never seen anyone arrange the notes like Frank did, because unlike the metal guys, Frank was doing very small sweeps, but between 2, 3, 4 strings, which I thought was much harder to do than just rake across all 6, you know. And he was also using scale lines, using that technique to play scales. It was amazing. I'd never seen anything like it. And I realized that I had a certain amount of facility within the fingers, the pick and the other 3 fingers, where I could incorporate the concept. I never took any of Frank's ideas, thank God, because it's so identifiable. You know, once you go down that road, you just become a poor imitation of the master, you know, Frank. But luckily, I could really get a lot of Frank's concepts and come up with my own ideas, and stuff just started pouring out of me, which was really good timing, because I didn't want to keep doing any more tapping, because I just felt, well, I never really came up with much original anyway. And I just met TJ, and I thought, I'm going to stand here with one finger poking around like when I'm standing next to this guy. And then it was lucky, because after about a few months of working on that particular angle, I did an album. I was in the States by now, and I did an album called Centrifugal Funk, where I got to play with Frank and Sean Lane.
I had that album.
Yeah, so I got to meet Frank. I was at the studio this beautiful studio out in Costa Mesa. I think it was called Fast Forward. I think it was where Halen and Holdsworth recorded a bit of the Metal Fatigue album.
Okay.
And used a beautiful 50-watt Marshall there that was their in-house amp. Oh, I'd love to have that amp now. I'll tell you, that was a good one. But yeah, as I was finishing up, Frank was coming in, and I got to have a chat to him. It was the first time I'd ever met him, and we're still great friends to this day. He's just a legend.
Nice.
What a guy.
Nice. Well, I got to say, my approach to Modes came from being a 14-year-old kid in '88 and seeing him doing an Ibanez clinic, and his approach to it, where he played the chords, same 3 chords, just in different sequence, and landing on a different one and saying, what key is this? And people would go, oh, that's in G, or that's in D, or that's in A. And he said, but they're the same chords. And then, so yeah, that's more the way I think about things. But he said after he'd done some playing, any questions? And everybody went, and he went, any questions not to do with the way I'm picking? Because I'll come back to that. And everyone went, he went, okay, so you want to see that. And it was the first time I'd ever seen anybody sweep pick, and it was mind-blowing, man. It was totally mind-blowing.
I actually only recently messaged Frank with this story, and when I used to travel a fair bit with Bobby Rock from the Nelson Band, and we do drum clinic tours with our friend Carl Carter on bass, and we were way over on the east coast of the States, and we'd finished doing a gig, and I was having a chat with these guys, and they said, wasn't that long ago we came to this very club, and it was to see the Chick Corea Electric Band. No, it was to see, that's right, it was to see the Electric Band. They were the headline. Mm-hmm. They said the opening act was Halen and Holdsworth.
Wow.
And we stood there and watched Alan and his trio, and we both looked at each other and went, wow, I feel sorry for whoever the guitar player is that's going to have to follow this. And Frank walked out and just laid waste to the joint. And I thought to myself, only Frank could follow Alan, like only Frank, because number one, the musical knowledge, done, the technical prowess, done, but the originality of concept, like you just can't deny. Frank has just got one of the most original approaches that you could possibly come up with. Nobody sounds like that.
Absolutely.
And nobody plays like that.
Yep.
No wonder Alan loved him so much, because it's just, it's just the same thing. I bet Alan would have thought, God, look at that. I never would have thought of that. Something completely original. And that's Frank. Just out of nowhere, out of Canberra, just
Yep.
Frank said he had that choice of I'd either go to a uni in some sort of conservatorium in Sydney, or I could go to GIT, and he chose GIT, and the rest is history, as they say.
Nice. I actually did send a message to him through his website asking if he'd like to come on. I haven't heard back yet. It'd be nice if he...
I hope you get him.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm just going to do...
Incredible teacher, yeah.
Absolutely. I'm just asking folks that are still listening if the audio's still okay. As I said, I have had some issues with my interface going from loud to quiet, etc. along the way. I'm going to keep talking in the meantime. But I wanted to ask you, Brett, when I spoke to Thomas McLaughlin a couple of nights ago, he walked away for 20 years from the guitar. By the time he got to about 14 or something, he got caught in that whole rabbit hole of production and samplers and wanting to make drum and bass music and all this kind of stuff, which I went down that road as well in the mid-90s. But he said he didn't play for 20 years. It's only a couple of years ago that he got back into it. But being mentored by Steve Vai, he said that Steve would have 6 months away from the instrument himself, and come back to it, and might have to have a couple of weeks of woodshedding to get the chops back. Have you ever had any time away from the instrument?
To be honest, no. But I'm at the same time, no. I've never not played for 6 months.
Okay.
Nothing like that.
Yep.
I mean, I've never not played for a week, but at the same time, I'm not a religious 2 hours, 4 hours a day guy. Like right now, I'm not practicing a lot, But when I pick the guitar up now, I'm very, very specific on what I'm thinking about and why I'm even grabbing the thing. It's that interval thing. Like a lot of times when I pick it up, I try to challenge myself to, especially with chords, to hear chord movement like start on one note and then build a chord from that note, and then from the next note build another chord from that note. So small triads, sort of things like that. This sounds a lot more technical than it is. Believe me, I'm no Ted Green, but I mean, I'm trying to, far from it, I'm afraid, but I'm trying to come up with an approach that I relate to personally. I've always had a hell of a time with chords. That's one of those things I wanted to really get into with Stuart Fraser, because Stuart, beautiful chord player, and just had facility with it. He would play chords a certain way and go, why wouldn't I think of that, And he just had a way of knowing the guitar in a way that I didn't, and I wanted to really work on that, but unfortunately he got sick and we never had the chance to get into it. And I thought, well, maybe I'm going to try and take my approach to single line playing and try and approach chords that way. And so it's not like I'm studying it every day or for a long period of time, but it's like when I do pick the guitar up, even if it's for a limited amount of time, it's on something that's very important that I get closer to, Mm-hmm. That's why I think, just standing here, and if I practice a lot, I get technique. Everybody does. Yep. That's what technique is. Technique is time. It's woodshed time. It's hours.
Yep.
It's running. It's endurance is running, And I can always relate. I used to, be the gym guy years ago, and I still exercise, but I used to be pretty hardcore into it back in the powerlifting days. And
I was going to ask you about that, actually.
Well, I mean, I never played any sports, and that was the sport I got into with my friends. We got into powerlifting,
Yep.
It was fun. But hurt, but it was fun. But you can relate it back to physical exercise. Like, it's time spent, effort expended, rewards earned. That's what chops are. You just shove yourself in a room and you play, and you will get better technically.
Yep.
But unless you're really side by side working on something conceptual, they don't grow. You'll get better at playing the same thing over and over again, but in the end, I just end up all dressed up with nowhere to go, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like it's just, and like I said, I see young players young enough to be my grandchildren, that are technically so far beyond what I'd ever be. I think there's got to be something else for me. Can I do something else? Like the slide playing, just, to me, is where I feel like I've got the most originality. This Rory Gallagher thing I just did, it's quite funny, It's like I was working on a bit of thumb pick stuff, because I never played thumb pick guitar before, and I was fascinated with how the blues players do that whole thumb thing. And I was listening to this song, "Walk on Hot Coals," that we used to play in our pub band, Rory's song, and I thought, man, you could do that, like a sort of a Robert Johnson-y type thing. So I set up a mic and I just did a version of it where I sang the song and played the tune like that style. And luckily I did it to a click track, and then later on I played bass and some drums, and I had to put a solo to it. And I remember I had a crack at just a regular solo, and I went, well, that's rubbish right there for a start. That's just completely inappropriate. Then I thought maybe I can copy Rory and do like a Rory-inspired solo, and that was lame beyond
Oh, really?
lame. Yeah, it just wasn't working. I was thinking, I can't play a solo in this song, And I remember standing there going, this solo needs a harmonica solo, because Rory was a gun harmonica player.
Was he really?
Oh, God, yeah, one of the best in the world. I mean, he's a good sax player too, Like, genius. And one of the greatest singers ever, Like, no one acknowledges how beautiful that man's voice was, And I went, Rory would just do a killer harp solo. And I went, I'll play the harp solo on the guitar. So I played a guitar monica solo.
Nice.
So, yeah, I loved how all it took was that mental shift to go, what's the direction? What are we doing here? You could do any number of things that would have been fine, but that was the shift. And I channeled my friend Steve Williams from the Farnham Band, and what would Steve play? And just try to choose harmonica-based intervals, the way harp players think, and the sound, and I was just really happy with how it turned out. It's a big part of. There's the thing. It's not about I've got technique. I can play. Therefore, I shall play.
Yeah.
What are you going to play? How are you going to frame it? I remember Zappa used to talk about that. Like, a composer has to frame things, you know. We use a conceptual frame to put around something. He says an artist puts a frame around the painting, otherwise it's what is that shit on the wall?
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And composer has to put a frame around their composition, otherwise it's just noise.
Yep.
And yeah, I had to put a frame around this thing and go, well, it's a solo, but what's it going to be? How's it work in this song? And I was really happy when I did it, because I thought, God, that's the big part of it right there. It's not even the fact that I was happy that I was able to play something. It's the fact that I even came up with an idea. So, yeah. Even the fact that I could just hear that it should have been a harmonica solo, and if it wasn't COVID and we're all locked down, I could have just rang up Steve and said, you want to come up for a day and play a harp solo for me, or can I come to you? So, yeah.
Speaking of harmonica players, Stevie Wonder. Man, I can be walking through a shopping mall and I'll hear a harmonica solo on something, and I'll just go, I don't know this song, but I know that's Stevie Wonder playing the harp, because he played a chromatic harp with the button on the side there.
Steve Williams, we were in a hotel room one night and he said, check this out. And he played Stevie Wonder's instrumental harmonica version of Alfie. And I said, Alfie, you know that song. And Stevie, he does this sort of tonguing thing where he gets staccato notes.
Yep.
And I actually did a few of those in this solo on the Rory thing, and I went, there's Stevie's harp thing.
Yeah,
you know?
yep.
And Steve said, check this out. You know, he said, listen to this. He said, there's whole websites devoted to how the hell he does this, you know. He said, now, you ready for the kicker? And I said, what's the kicker? And he said he was 15 when he did it.
Wow.
He's like 15 or 16, I think,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think he was about that age or not much older when he wrote My Sharia Moore. Like, I mean, Jesus, you know, like
Wow.
you know, there's your humility right there. I mean,
Absolutely.
what do you say to that, you know? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you think back to all these classic compositions by these people from way back when. And they were kids.
Totally.
My voice is getting scratchy. I need a glass of water.
Yeah, mate, if you want to grab one, that's fine by me, because we haven't even touched on gear yet. I was going to get to that, but before I moved on to gear, I wanted to ask you about, now, everyone wears in-ear monitors and the like now, but back in those days in the 70s, 80s, nobody really thought about it, but hearing protection, and a lot of the greats now are bone deaf.
Yeah.
Did you wear earplugs, protection? Do you have issues with tinnitus now?
No, look, I'm pretty lucky. I mean, it is there. If it's a quiet night, especially here in the country where we have no real traffic noise at night, you know.
Yep.
If I lay there and I focus on it, I can find it. But it's got to be that. It's not like it's not anything that's damaging or a problem. And I guess I'm kind of lucky. I'm one of the few guitar players in the world that people ask to turn up.
Right.
I've never been a horrendously loud player, and it's that need to fit in to the sound of the band.
Yep.
Like, I don't want to be the loudest guy on stage. I want to be in it, you know.
Sure.
Look, if you listen to my albums, they're sort of wall of soundish. Like, they're a lush sort of collage of sounds, and I love that. Like, I love that. I don't want to say orchestral. That's you know, cashing. That's writing checks my body can't cash, you know. But I love that concept of like a whole lot of sounds blending in together, you know.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I've never been a really loud player, but I've been in some pretty loud environments. And so, yeah, if I'm going to play with my friends at the local pub, the earplugs are going in. I'm telling them, I ain't going deaf for that.
Yeah.
And there's been a couple of occasions where I've walked away and gone, man, that hurt. That just hurt.
Yep.
When I was doing the Nelson gig, they had massive side fills, and I was stage. I was facing the crowd. My right ear was right next to that right side fill, and if there were mic spikes happening, this guy got it first.
Yeah,
so this
right.
one, the cell phone's always on this ear. So
Yep.
I think Jennifer Batten, I got to meet Jennifer many years ago, and she said from touring with Jeff Beck, the left ear got it. And I said, so,
Yep.
you know, depending on where we stand next to each other, we're either perfectly hearing or we're deaf.
Yeah, yeah. So I did have a chat with Jennifer a couple of weeks ago. Folks, if you're stumbling on this and you're thinking, where's these interviews? I've got a whole playlist of these on my channel, Chit Chats with Git Cat. So please like, subscribe, all that kind of thing. I hate asking for that, but you don't.
Gotta do it.
Yeah, you got to do it. So Jennifer, we had a great conversation about her hearing, and she said just the wall of Marshalls with Michael Jackson as well, and that when she got her hearing tested, it was just this steep fall off at a really low too, at about 2K.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
So that is a big issue. I've had ringing in my ears since I was a teenager, because I started playing quite young in the bands and everything. But that whole being not too loud on stage, it really depends on who you're playing with, the gear that you're using, how directional your boxes are. I've always liked to play in stereo, not because of I need have two boxes, I'm loud. It's so I don't have to be as loud. I can angle them a bit, and I've got more spread.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
But I do realize there's you might be aware of a show called Absolutely 80s that gets around Australia, which is the guys from the 80s. It's run by Scott Kahn from Kids in the Kitchen, but you've got Brian Mannix, all those guys. So I'm the Queensland guitar player for that. And depending on who's singing at the time, I'm drastically different on stage in terms of volume. Scott generally starts it off and he likes it down low, just sitting in the mix. Then you'll get Brian Mannix, Uncanny X-Men, walk out. And the first thing he does is just look at you and he goes, "Fucking turn it up, mate." And you say, okay, there it is, yep. And then Scott will come back out. And then Sean Kelly's pretty easy, whatever's going. He's just a very cruisy, mellow guy. But then Dale Ryder just can't get enough from Boom Crash Opera. He's just like, and he'll stand right next to my rig and he's just like, more. And I'm like, dude, I'm past 6 and on a tube amp on my Friedman, it's not getting louder. It's just getting more compressed. So it really depends on who you're playing with, huh?
It does, yeah. A lot of John Stevens loves it loud.
Yeah.
Jimmy Barnes, louder the better.
Yep.
It's like, John Farnham's been using in-ears exclusively now since about 96.
Really?
So it's really irrelevant to John. We don't use in-ears on the singers are all on in-ears. Mm-hmm. But on the live gigs, we've been doing a lot of Red Hot Summers and Day on the Green stuff. So a lot of times we rock up to these shows and we haven't even seen the stage until we walk on. There's not even a line check.
Yeah, right.
And we talked about this quite a few years ago and just said it's safer if we just use wedges, just regular monitors, because there'd be too many people yelling at poor old Adam, our sound guy. When we walk up there, it's usually set and forget. Once Adam's got it dialed in, it stays the same, and it's loud, but it's a good loud. It's not my ears aren't ringing by the end of the gig. I just feel fulfilled.
Yeah, right. So, Brett, as I said, we haven't really talked about gear. Has there been any mainstays for you that you've used throughout the career, or has it been a constant evolution?
It's been an evolution. After I had that horrible Jade amp that I talked about, and I'd finally started to work, I got a Marshall 1970 Super Lead 100 watter, and I got it from a shop in Frankston, and then I was lucky enough to get the matching slant cab for it. And I remember the first time I got it, I realized straight away, this is going to be way too loud, to use. And then I read about, in Guitar Player, I read about this thing called the Altair Power Attenuator. And this came out way before Power Soaks, before Tom Scholz did that whole thing.
Yep.
And I ordered it from the States, and it turned up, and it was everything I dreamed of. It was perfect. It was just the attenuator you put in between the speaker and the head. And at that stage, I was using the first channel of the Marshall, channel 1, which was sort of normally the bright channel, but just sounded great with the Strat, And then, of course, like an idiot, I was using a cheap guitar cable as a speaker cable and blew the amp up. So melted the transformer completely. So I got that fixed. And then the first channel sounded like crap and the second channel sounded good. So I started using that. Then I got a Dodd preamp. It was one of the ones that didn't have not even a switch, just a knob. So it was just like a clean boost. And it just hit the front of the amp really hard and gave you that extra overdrive. And these things sell for like $500 US on Reverb now. So they're quite the collector's item.
Yep.
And it was just, I still listen to old cassettes, and if you can get past the horrible playing, the guitar sound is to die for. It's just the most beautiful, focused that's your sound. That's your blues, rock, metal. It'll do all that, you know. But it's not metal in the sense that it's fuzzy and high-endy. It's just sweet. It's the best guitar sound I've ever had. And like an idiot, I sold that amp, and it went round and round and round in circles for a while. I sold it after I went to America and needed money. I just figured, it's an old amp, who cares, you know. And luckily it ended up in the hands of a fantastic guitar player, producer in Melbourne named Dave Carr. And Dave was kind enough to leave it at a studio a few years back so I could play through it again. And
nice.
He's changed it a lot, so it's more his amp now than it ever was mine. He's owned it for longer than I ever did. And I did ask Dave, I said, would you sell it back to me, Dave? And he said, oh, yeah, I'll sell it to pay for my own funeral. And I thought, I'll take that as a no, thank you. So, but yeah, I was really glad it ended up in the hands of someone talented enough to get the joy out of it, and who also recognises the value that he'll never sell it again. So then I'd sort of amp hopped for a long time, and in America used a lot of Hughes and Kettner preamps, which were good gear. But and then I was struggling with this new Hughes and Kettner triamp combo. Mm-hmm. I just could not pull a tone out of it, and it was at TJ's apartment. I said to him, am I nuts, or I just can't get a sound out of this thing? He said, there's only one way to find out if it's any good or not. And he said, that's compare it to something else. He said, let's go down the road to Making Music. They've got Bogners down there. And I said, what's a Bogner? And he said, you'll find out. And so we went down there and just dragged the amp down there. And I plugged into a Bogner Ecstasy, into one of their matching 412 cabs. And I went, my God, I've been under a rock for this long.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that amps like this existed. The clean channel on this amp was unbelievable. And, of course, the blue channel on overdrive was like, I'm in heaven, you know. So I bought a Bogner. Excuse me.
Mate, I'll give your voice a break there, because there is a comment relating to that I've just read.
Okay.
If you want to have a sip of water. From Flash Grover, it says, hey, all, I tried Brett's Bogner 100B when it arrived in Oz. Killer amp.
Yeah, they're beautiful amps. I'd love to get another one, but the bank account can't support it, I'm afraid. And I had to sell that amp. We needed a septic tank, so I'm afraid the amp had to go. So,
oh, no.
When you build a house, everything must go. So someone's got a beautiful Bogner that they got at a bargain price. And if you're out there watching this, I hate you, and I'm coming for you, okay? So, you got a killer deal on that thing, and I'll, you know, if you're suffering due to this lockdown, let me know. I'll buy it back from you. So, oh, man, should never have sold that thing. But, you know, hey, they're always making them. That's why I looked at it. Like, you know, you can always buy another amp, you know. I mean, there's Friedmans, there's Suhrs, there's Bogners, there's this, that, and the other, and, you know, they're out there. And, look, I'm lucky enough to be bestowed with all the beautiful Axe FX gear. So that's my mainstay now. That's
what you're using now, Axe FX?
Well, I mean, as far as the Farnham stuff goes, I've been using an Axe 8 for about the past 3 years.
Yeah, right.
And spent many, many hours dialing that thing in, basing it on real amps and getting good sounds. And I figured, well, you know, you're either going up there with that, or you go up there with your pedal board and rented backline. Yeah. So the one thing about, we get to use the same monitors, and they're good. Like those wedges we play through are about $10,000 each, apparently. Wow. So, yeah, they make sure that they've got good wedges for those gigs. I don't know what they are, but they're bloody good. Yeah. So I've got the two stereo monitors in front of me, and I get my stereo sound through that and the band. And then we've got usually two backline backup amps, which we also run the Axe 8 into as well. Nice. So I've got it behind me. So it's like I'm Pete Townsend up there. It's just, I don't bother anybody. You know, you step 2 feet that way, no one hears it. Yep. And it's just ridiculously loud and good and heavenly, and I get all the feedback and everything, and I'm just loving it. Great. It's great. And the thing is with the Axe 8 it never changes. So whatever goes to front of house, Grant Walsh gets the same thing every time. There's no mic placement. There's no wind. Mm-hmm. There's no rented backline amps that blow up halfway through the gig. Yep. I don't spend the first 3 songs with my back to the crowd going like this, you know. It's like I just get up there and I just do it, you know. It's pretty much the same every night. So yeah, it just makes sense.
It's funny. There's been a bit of a shift in technology. As I mentioned to you, I've known Dave Leslie for a very long time, and I was using a Kemper when I was touring doing the Queen tribute thing, and I remember mentioning that to him, and he said, "Oh, I've had played one in the shop. It's not the same." But then he had a bad experience doing a multi guitar player night where he had a backline and an amp that just let him down. And as you know, when your sound's not on, your playing's just not on, and he just said he just hung his head, just go, well.
Or when your sound completely checks out,
yeah,
when
yeah,
it's got nothing.
Yeah.
So
he said he saw everyone else was using the Axe effects and jumped on and got himself one. And I've checked out his rig now with the AX8, etc. And it's funny talking to Steve Stevens recently. As I said, when I do these chats, I get talking to people for half an hour beforehand. And Steve had just started using the Boss Tube Amp expander using speaker IRs instead of miking up, and just went, whoa, never miking up again. His sound guy came running down to the front of the stage.
Is that the Wazza thing?
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing piece of kit, that thing.
Yeah, and there's a few things out there like that. Have you heard of the Blue Guitar Amp 1 as a
Thomas Blug. Yeah.
Thomas is a lovely mate. He's a lovely chap.
I met Thomas when he was working for Hughes and Kettner.
Okay.
He used to work for them. Thomas was probably one of the guys that implemented the Redbox technology. That was
sure.
They were years ahead of the curve with that. With the speaker sim in it and everything. And so Thomas he's a gem.
Absolutely, that's what Jennifer Batten's using now is the Amp 1 and. Yeah, I did have a chance to play it when I went to a YouTuber event last year in Germany, and that's where I first met Thomas and had a play with that unit, and that's really got pricked my ears up in terms of what I want to use.
There's so many options out there now. Like all the Boss gear is great, Kemper's great, Fractal's fantastic. Line 6 is doing it.
Yep.
And there's the Blue Guitar. Just the other night. Friday nights, James Ryan does a great fun live stream on YouTube and Facebook, and he was using the Synergy gear. Yep. And that's based on when I was doing a lot of work for CMI here in Melbourne.
Yep.
When I was endorsing ESP and all that stuff, and they were trying to get the Randall modular system going.
Yep.
And I think that's a follow-on from that technology.
And that came from Bruce Egnater. Who I think I have to check my diary. If he's not on tomorrow, it's the day after. I've got Bruce coming.
Well, there you go. Yeah, talk to Bruce about it. I'm sure Bruce is involved in the Synergy stuff.
He is because he owns the license on that gear.
Yeah,
and
James was pulling some fantastic sounds out of that. So I mean, there's no end to what you can do now. And I totally get it. If you're in love with your old favorite amp, and it's the greatest thing you've ever got, I get it. I wish I had an amp that I could get married to, but I can't take it anywhere. Not even with Farnham. We can't travel with gear anymore. If you can't fit it in a small road case or in your suitcase, you ain't bringing it.
Isn't that crazy what it's become? Because the days of touring acts back right up until only recent times, people used to load the truck and go from town to town to do all these shows, but now it's flying from city to city.
Sometimes, if we do a run of Red Hot Summer gigs, say, they will have a truck and we can bring whatever we want. But at the same time, I don't have an amp. I don't have anything that I'm looking at going, that's my dream amp. Yep. If I had that Bogner Ecstasy and the matching cab, then, that'd be my amp.
Absolutely.
But and I'd be using that every night. But at the end of the day, it's like, what kind of mic are they putting on it? Have they put it in the right position? There's so many factors.
Absolutely.
Bruce. If you go DI, the consistency outweighs the rigmarole. You know what I mean? It's like the screw around and the AX8 has been so bulletproof. That thing has never let me down. Like I just plug into that sucker and years, I've been jostled around and having crap tipped on it and all the rest of it. It's just sorry, I'm just plugging in my phone into my computer.
Right. So I went and saw Southern Sons recently, who did a reunion run of shows.
Yeah, we did some of those gigs with.
And I used to go see them back in the day. I was a huge fan of Jack Jones, Owen Thomas, who I'm trying to lock in some dates with to come on and have a chit chat with me on this show. And I used to marvel at the huge racks full of gear that they had, you know, back in the 90s when I'd see them. And now they're all touring with AX8s as well. And I heard Reggie actually talking to somebody after the show, a bit of a meet and greet, and just saying, wow, we could just recreate all those sounds with this little box now. It's a real, I hate the word game changer, but it has been, hasn't it?
Well, the thing is too, especially Irwin, like, you know, you could give him a Gorilla amp and a guitar out of the Kmart and he'd be able to pull an amazing sound out of it, you know. So, you know, he's always been able to, he was way ahead of that curve with the Mike Landau thing as well. Like, Irwin was always dialed into what the LA guys were doing, like as far as what they were using, and like he was the guy that had an Egnator before I ever knew what that was, and the Soldano before I knew what that was, and you know, he's just always had great sounds. And at the end of the day, it really is the nut holding the wick. I mean, if you're ready to invest the time and dig around this technology until you get what you want out of it, you will get anything you want out of it. When I was doing the demos for my first album, for Big Sky, I had a Boss rack mount unit called a VF1, and I bought it just because I used it for delay and reverb, and you could foot switch the delay on and off, and that's why I bought it. It was a little half-space rack unit. And when I started doing the demos for that album, I realised that it had distortions in there, and it also had a speaker simulator. And it had one speaker simulator. That's what you got.
Yep.
And I dialed up all the guitar sounds, and I would put the demos up on, I forget, it was like mp3.com. I think it was a site like that back then. This is like, God, late 90s, I think. Early 2000s or something. I forget. Way back when. And just to see what people thought of the demos. And people were emailing me saying, what amp are you using? You know, Bogner, Soldano? Like, I said, no, it's a $300 rack, half-space rack unit.
Yeah.
And there you go, you know. It's like you can just take anything if you just sit with it long enough and you adapt your touch to it. And, yeah, you can pull anything out of it. So
because it's in the fingers, and that's one thing that
and the brain, you know, it's in the head, you know, like the greatest gear in the world does not a great muso make, you know, and the crappiest gear in the world doesn't stop someone from being a great muso.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Pull amazing stuff out of. Stuart Fraser was like that. You could give Stuart one. Remember those smoky amps that were built in cigarette packets?
I'll just grab one. I'll just grab one so people know what you're talking about. I got everything here, mate. I have everything.
There it is.
I've actually put a little clip on the back so I can hang it off my pants or something. But let me get in there. Let me grab my little switcher so people know what you're talking about. And I have to hide my eyes or else it'll focus on my eyes. But I think people could see that. That's actually a cigarette packet.
Yeah. Yeah, Stuart knew that guy that was building them. He met him in America and became friends with him, and he gave him one. And, yeah, you know, like Stuart was the guy that would plug into an amp and it could have the rattiest, weirdest sound in the world, and he would just adapt to it. And he would find something to play that made that sound work. Like, he would embrace the sound and use it.
Yep.
Like, whereas I just go, no, I don't like that. It's not the Bogner, you know. And,
yeah.
And whereas he wouldn't fight it. He'd just go, I'll roll with it. TJ would do it too. TJ would just look for the weirdest sound you could find and pull something magic out of it, something hilarious or brilliant, you know. Sure. Like, he would just roll with it.
So Brett, what's your number one guitar at the moment?
The Red Strat. That's what I'm playing.
Back to that, eh?
Yeah, I mean, they change. I mean, I was using the blue ESP, which is hanging up on the wall there for a long time, and that's a beautiful instrument. But when Stuart couldn't play with us anymore in John's band, he had to focus on his treatment and everything. I was still using the blue ESP, which has the humbuckers, and I just thought, you know, because Stuart often plays Nags guitars, and he would play a single coil, and I really missed that sound. And I thought, you know what, the Strats really are the Swiss Army knife, aren't they, you know? And I thought I'm going to go back to playing a Strat. So I was actually playing an ESP Strat, one of the vintage series ones. Really nice guitar. And I kept looking at. I was going to try and buy a Sir Strat. I really wanted to get one of Scott Henderson's Strats because, Scott's one of my heroes, and not to try and emulate him, but I just know I've become good friends with Scott, and I know how particular he is about gear. And I figure if he's going to put his name on this guitar, it's got to be great. Otherwise, he just wouldn't even let it leave the shops. And I thought, well, that's a shoe-in. That's a guaranteed great Strat style guitar.
Yep.
And then I kept looking at this red guitar hanging on the wall, and my mother had passed away. And I thought, she left me a little bit of cash, and I thought, I want to use that cash to get this thing back into playing condition. Because it had a weird Fishman bridge on it with a DI split and everything, and I didn't particularly like the pickups, and it still had the original, no, it had this neck on it, yeah. And so I got a really nice Callahan bridge.
Yep.
The Callahan bridges are really nice. They're real vintage spec. And
yep.
And I just completely by accident or by fluke, the Virgil Arlo pickup company sent me some pickups for some humbuckers. And I just went, man, these are incredible. And then I asked them if they'd be kind enough to send me some single coils, and I just went, well, that's it. These are the greatest bloody single coils I've ever heard. And then I asked Scott about the buzz factor because he's got the Sir system where it's got the dummy pickup.
Yep.
And he said before John developed his own system, he was using a system by a company called Illich out of California. So I contacted them and got one of his systems, which sits in the back plate, the trem plate. And that sucks out most of the buzz. So I've got my beautiful Virgil Arlo pickups. The Illich system kills the buzz, the Callahan bridge, and it is one of the most stable Strats I've ever played in my life.
Nice.
It stays. It's almost like my mum just looked down at me and said, "Here, have a good Strat."
Nice one, mate. Nice one.
So
it's funny you should bring up the Illich. I put together. I'm just going to switch to the shot of me. Is that the right camera? Is that one there? Yes, it is. It's still the right one.
You know what? I'm gonna do another quick.
You go for it, mate, and I'm just going to explain some of the stuff that you're talking about. So what Brett was talking about there, I've got several Strats. That one there is something I pieced together from parts. I'm going to go grab it. I had the Illich system put in that, but the person I got to wire it all for me didn't do such a good job, so I ripped it out, and it's all sitting over there. Callahan bridge that Brett was talking about is in that one there, and he is absolutely right. That's one of the best vintage bridges that you could possibly get in, and the clincher for me on that is there's no movement when I put the tremolo arm in it. I hate it if the trem arm has any slack whatsoever, but Callahan have got that completely nailed. And I actually have my very first guitar sitting back there as well, which is just down to the original body and neck. I've pulled everything off that guitar. It was a cheap Onyx copy that I got when I was 12 years old, and I'm going to restore that. And I'm got a bit of hardware lying around, but if anybody has any suggestions of what I should use for bridge, pickups, etc., I am going to do that one back up. I should go grab some guitars to show you guys what I'm talking about. I'll just lose the headphones for a second. This is the one that I put together out of parts and had the original Illich system in, and that was actually it was built into the back plate on that, but as I said, it wasn't wired so well, so I pulled it out, and it's sitting over just behind the camera actually in my little box of parts. And the Callahan, one Callahan bridge would be in my main workhorse Strat, which is this guy.
Right, there you go.
I got cables and things along the way here, and again I have to hide my eyes for the camera to actually focus on this, but that has I'm not going to take anything out, Callahan bridge in there with Kinman pickups, a
Beautiful. Yeah.
big 9.0. So that's the sound of a P90, which I'd never tried until recently, and I'm a fan, let me tell you.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, the Kinmans are good bridges, aren't they? Oh, the Callahams.
Yeah. So what I was saying there, Brett, while you were away was what sold me on that was it was a vintage style bridge that the arm didn't have any movement.
Exactly.
I use an arm much like Brian May would, in that one finger is always on it. And let me just switch there so we can see the two of us. So I'm doing subtle things. And if there's any movement in the arm at all before it actually moves the bridge, I'm just, what is this? And they've got it sussed in the way.
That's why I was quite shocked when I talked to Scott about it, because Scott Henderson, because he's so particular about everything. And Scott's on the bar all the time now. You know, he's doing some amazing things with the whammy bar. And he didn't care. He said, I don't care about the movement. You know, I have to worry about it. And I thought, wow, that's fascinating, because I was trying the old plumber's tape around the thread, and that's fine and everything, but you got to do it every time you wind the thing in. And then I just heard about the Callahan bridge and how they sleeve it, but then they also do everything else. And Scott talked about, you know, you got to get rid of the sort of some sort of metal plating they do on the block, the string block, and all that sort of stuff. And they do all that. You know, they just have the raw metal and everything. So I'm surprised he wasn't hip to that, but he didn't care, you know. So yeah.
I just realised that as I went to grab some guitars, everybody would have seen that I'm wearing my pajama pants right now.
As you should be. I'm wearing my tracky dacks, so, you know,
well,
it's like, wow.
Actually, after we got the Skype connection and everything sorted, the sun went a little bit. I thought, normally I just wear a black T-shirt every time, so it's rare that I've actually got something on, just so nobody picks on me for what I'm wearing. I just keep a uniform, and I forgot to take this off, but I thought, I'm going to get cold. I'll put my pajama pants on and my woolly socks.
Well, with us, the sun moves this way, so it's going to be blasting in through these windows in a while, and it's going to be like a sauna in here. So,
okay, well, the actual hue of your camera has changed somewhat. It was like a bluish, and now you've got the more of a warmer tone happening there.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions for Brett? Because Brett, remember we said about the time flies. We have been talking now for quite a while.
We're going on for 3 hours.
2.5 hours.
2.5 to 3 hours.
Yeah. I'm good to go for 3 if you are. But I'm just thinking if anybody has any questions.
Steve Williams used to drive him mad when we'd be touring with John, me and Stuart. He said, you let us within 2 meters of each other and we just start talking about pickups, and he'd be like, God, it's always whammy bars and pickups with you bastards, isn't it? And
it's bad for me because I didn't play a hell of a lot of guitar for a long time and was right into the production thing from the mid-90s right up until maybe 5 years ago. And so when I get talking with people, it can either be guitars, or Pro Tools preamps, blah, blah, blah.
it's a healthy subject.
It is. Actually, I did a live stream a week or two ago. A friend of mine works for Avid, the Pro Tools people. And he used to be my assistant years ago when I was doing albums around town for people. And now he's the top guy in Australia for Avid. And I said to him, mate, you should come on. I'm trying to keep this a mixture of known players, manufacturers, and then people that we can learn things from. Because I want people to, if you want people to watch, you got to give them a reason to give up their time. Yeah. And I said to him, mate, do you want to come on? He says, oh, yeah, but what the hell are we going to talk about? And I said to him, mate, you've been threatening to give me a lesson, a Pro Tools power lesson for a while, and all the stuff that I've missed since jumping in at 4.3 and I didn't pick up all these new things. Let's do it live. So we did, and that was great. But then I clued him onto just talking about the gibberish talk. There was a segment on Dave Letterman years ago that I saw where the two guys came out and basically just read a flyer of the latest version of Pro Tools. And to me, it was perfect sense. Hey, now available 24-bit, 96K, all the normal stuff, right? The crowd thought it was the most hilarious thing they'd ever heard. Like, look it up on YouTube, you'll find it. And technical memos. So when guys get together and start talking gear, yeah, absolutely, I totally get that.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Yeah. It's some people are so technically savvy, and they get into the minutiae of specs.
Yep.
And then some of us sort of shoot up the middle, and then there's others who just like, I don't want to know about that. I just want to plug into it. And I love that too. Like I love the old school guys that where they just had people around them to sort all that out. Like there's this beautiful documentary about Tom Dowd, the engineer, the producer engineer, and Eric Clapton's talking about him. I think he did Layla, that did the Derek and the Dominoes album. I mean, amongst a million other things, Coltrane, Miles Davis, and Aretha Franklin. The guy's just a legend. It's one of the most beautiful documentaries. And Eric Clapton's sitting there saying, he said, I didn't feel I needed to talk to him because he was one of those behind the scenes guys, one of the white coat guys.
Yeah.
He says it wasn't until I got to know him that I realized he was a musician who also knew how to run all this stuff and make you sound good, and also had good ideas about your song, and yeah, it was interesting. That's why a lot of the guitar players that you watch The Edge on that It Might Get Loud movie, and he probably doesn't have a clue how to set up his rig.
No.
That thing is like Starship Enterprise,
Yeah,
but he knows how to play it, but
totally.
he doesn't. He wouldn't know the ins and outs of the thing, literally,
But then you see an interview with Dallas Shue, his tech, and he completely knows it inside out.
It's his job to know it.
Yeah. Maybe we just got some...
Whereas Scott Henderson knows every cable in his rig because he soldered it.
Yeah.
He knows everything about all the technical aspects of what he's using, and I really love that. Like Scott's a go-to for me. It's terrible name dropping, I know, but I've just been so lucky to get to become friends with one of the biggest influences I've ever had, and who is still just kicking ass out there. Like Scott's just one of those guitar players and musicians that's just getting better and better. I don't know if anyone's heard his latest album, People Mover. It's unbelievable. It's like that guy, man. He's just, there's this fascination with sort of fusion now. It used to be neoclassical shred guitar and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And now every young hotshot's a fusion player, Scott's the guy. He's the reason.
Okay.
Like, he doesn't get the credit for that, but he is the guy who's triggered this whole movement. I guarantee it,
Sure.
He is that bridge between, he's the bridge between Richie Blackmore and jazz,
Yep.
Like, I remember hearing him, I thought he was a jazz guitarist that bought distortion pedals and became a fusion guitarist.
Yep.
And then I'd heard him talking about Richie Blackmore in his open counselling one day, and I said, wait, you're a Blackmore fan? And he said, well, yeah, that's how I started out. I was Richie Blackmore, Albert King, it's like, and he said, I'm a blues rock guitarist that learned jazz.
Cool.
I thought, oh my God, I just thought he was so good at playing jazz and fusion. I thought he was from that world, and then he found rock. But no, he's a trip.
Now, when you say new fusion players, do you know Australian guitar player Pliny? Have you heard him?
Oh yeah, I've heard Plenty. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah,
I love his stuff. Yeah. Well, Plenty's even a different animal again. Like the way he bridges like modern production with and by that I just mean modern rock production with melodic rock. I just really love the way his songs sort of have that. They bridge that gap of modern ambient music with metal,
Yeah.
And it sounds natural. It's really organic. It doesn't sound forced to me. Like I've heard other people try and copy him now, because that's what people do. The minute they hear something, they go, okay, so now I'll do that. And it's like, dude, think for yourself, come on.
Totally.
But no, they all they know how to do is copy, I'm afraid. So it's like, you don't want to do that, man. You don't want to do that because you might end up on a gig with Plenty and you'll suck because he's the real thing and you're not. It's and but yeah, Plenty's stuff really just sounds fresh to my ears, and it's obvious it came from here. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like
absolutely.
But see, there's another guitar player I love called Michael Brook. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of him. Joe Crichton turned me on to him, and he did an album a long time ago called Cobalt Blue. And I went looking for that album on Joe's recommendation and couldn't find it. So I found this live album he'd done called Live at the Aquarium. And now he's a trip. He invented what he called the infinite guitar system, and it's like the Sustainiac, the Fernandez Sustain type system, the Sustainiac, which is like an Ebo in a pickup.
I've got
you know
one
what I
back
mean?
there. Well, had one back there.
Yeah, and Michael invented it was a separate system, and that's what the Edge used to do With or Without You on the Joshua Tree and all that sort of stuff. And because Michael did a few albums with Daniel Lanois and Brian Eno, and that's Michael's sort of known for doing ambient music, but he's done a lot of beautiful film score stuff. His music was featured in Heat, the movie, and Into the Wild, a lot of really good stuff. And this live thing, it's him at the London Aquarium, which is now a gig apparently, and it's him sort of playing to loops that he's set up. So it's years ahead of its time in that regard. How he swells them in and out, I don't know, but he's doing it all live. And I remember it was one of those albums where I bought it, and I was listening to it. First time I thought, yeah, it's kind of cool. Second time, it's kind of cool. Third, fourth, it's kind of cool. And by the fifth time, I just went, oh my God, he's a genius. This is genius, you know, like it just. And so I hear that, and then I hear Plenty, and I think, well, there's another connector there, you know. It's like Michael's music in Plenty is like that with some Metallica chucked in there, or Pantera, you know, or something. It's modern metal, you know what I mean? So yeah, I love the way music sort of morphs into itself and
absolutely
is a hybrid of other elements.
And it almost seems like when you like the beauty of a band, as opposed to being a solo artist, is when you get all different influences come in together, and you've got guys from all different walks of life, musically speaking, that just create a whole new path. And like you say, you know, you're not trying to sound like somebody else. It just comes out that way. Yeah,
if it's a true band where there's no one sort of dominating the vision, and it's input from everybody, something amazing can happen, you know. Like, look at the Police. I mean, you know, the Police, even though they're Sting's songs, I mean, for the most part, I know Stuart and Andy did contribute, but the songs we walk away are written by Sting.
Yeah.
But it's the alchemy of those three guys, you know. Those songs would always be brilliant no matter, because as Sting said, you know, he said Roxanne was originally like a bossa nova or something, and it sounds beautiful like that.
Yeah.
But nothing sounds like the Police but the Police because of Andy and Stuart and Sting. You know, it's those three guys that make that band unique. And the Police were instrumental for me to make me stop thinking that music had to be number one heavy and it had to have a roaring guitar solo. Like, it could just be a great song. Yep. You know, that was the Police. I went, okay, now I just listen to music. I don't have any preconceived notions or prejudices about what it is. So it made me just admit that I just love pop music and music in general, and it didn't have to be macho posturing and all this sort of crap, you know.
Yep. So Brett, you touched on something before when you mentioned the powerlifting, and I know back in the earlier days of Farnham, John would call you Rambo, and you did look like Rambo from the movie back then. So was the weight training, was it powerlifting, or were you getting into bodybuilding back then? And
no, it was powerlifting.
Is this powerlifting?
No one would ever want to see me running around in my undies, I'll tell you that much. But the Rambo thing is very funny, because when I was first touring with John, I just used to wear a tank top. David Hirschfelder's father was fantastic. He used to come up to me and say, "I call you the man of many tank tops." Brilliant. And he was a great guy. And so I just bought a tank top, and it had Mango written on it. It was the Mango brand, I think, you know. Must have been a brand back then in the 80s. And we were backstage at this gig after the show, and I'm just standing there, and Steve Housden was there from LRB. Yep. And he said, "What's that you say on your tank top? Rambo." And John went, "That's it. You're Rambo from now on. That's it. You're done." And it just became a nickname. And it's sort of funny because people often, they talk about that era and they say, "God, you were huge back then." And I'm like, I've always been a little guy. I'm very small. Like, I mean, I'm only 5'9" in a strong breeze. You know?
Yeah.
And I'm not tall. I think it's the deception of how you look from the stage and under lights. Like, and I suppose I was bigger back then because of, you know, I was younger and I was working out a lot. But no, it started off just doing basic bodybuilding movements. Look, I'd never played any sports, and I was fascinated by the fact that you had control over how you physically looked. I thought you were just either born fit and muscular or you were a fat guy. And I've always kind of struggled with my weight. because I love food. I'm a foodie, and I thought, wow, this is interesting. You can actually control the way you look. And I became fascinated by that. And so initially it started off as doing bodybuilding movements, and then me and my friends eventually migrated to a gym in Bendigo, which is about 45 minutes from here. And it was run by a guy named Laurie Butler, and Laurie was one of the greatest powerlifters in the world. And that was when we just got into that actual sport of powerlifting. And it was tremendous fun. We just all did it together, and it was a hang. And it was great fun. I'm still really interested in it. I just last night I was watching some international powerlifting stuff. You know, just fascinating to me how strong people can get. It's incredible.
It's funny. I'm the opposite. So I'm 6'3". So I'm always been tall and lanky, and I've spent a lot of my adult life being in the gym because I don't want to be skinny. The opposite thing, right?
Yeah.
But I have had issues with tendonitis in recent years, and I think it's because of overplaying and then also the gym thing. So during the whole lockdown thing and the gym's closed, I completely stopped, and I'm back to being little stickman Rick again. But I just started up. Yesterday was my second day back in, and let me tell you, after that first day, no weight, pretty much just doing it, bench pressing with 5 kilos aside, just getting the movement down to make sure, build again from a tendon level. I thought, I'm not going to feel this. 2 days later,
Sore, yeah, isn't that incredible?
Oh man, let me tell you,
it's wild, isn't it? Yeah, the soreness is incredible. It's
I like it though. I like it.
Well, it makes you feel alive, and it makes your body. Look, it's like anything. You've got to approach with caution, and you don't want to overdo any one thing. Anything can be overtrained. Like about 2 years ago, well, it's 2 years since, but for about 2 years, I really got into the skipping rope, and I just loved it. And it was brilliant at keeping the weight off. I've never been fitter.
Yep.
And it got to the stage where I could skip for like 40 minutes straight.
Well, that's a good.
I was doing it every day, and phenomenal for building just good endurance, and I loved it. I thought, God, I finally found an aerobic activity I really enjoy, because I hate running, hate it.
Same.
I love swimming, but who's got a lap pool, and especially a heated one. And but then I started to get problems in my forearms. Took about 2 years to show up, but it did show up. And the skipping rope had to go, I just had to stop.
Yep.
And and you can't overdo a good thing, you got to just be careful. And with weight training, like if I do deadlifts and stuff like that, or chin-ups, I always use wrist straps, so I take the stress off my hands.
Yep.
So I don't have good grip strength, but who cares? I'm not competing,
It's like, it was chin-ups actually that actually really messed with my forearms. I worked out. That was the thing.
Yeah, you got to use wrist straps. You got to. If you're a guitar player, you don't get the forearm development and you don't get the strength. But that's all right. And look, as you get older, like I'm 57 now, so I mean, my training now is based around just very, very careful self-preservation. Like my ego is out of the equation. There's no numbers to brag about. Not that there ever were, but there certainly aren't now.
Yeah.
It's just about, I'm glad I can get out there and just move and do something.
Nice.
And I heard a fantastic quote, and this applies to anything. This is one of the greatest quotes. It did come from some fitness thing on a YouTube site, and I can't remember who it was. But it was, most people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in a decade. And I thought, man, that is a fantastic quote. If you chip away at something, then within 10 years, you can transform yourself at almost any age,
Yep.
But if you say, I'm going to get this down in a year, some things just take longer than a year. We as musicians know that.
Yeah.
Like if you say, I'm going to learn to alternate pick like Guthrie Govan, and I'm going to do it in a year, it's like, yeah, well, good luck with that,
Yeah.
I think Guthrie's been doing it a lot longer than that, It's like, or as an example, of anything. And I'm sure Guthrie would be the first guy to say, mate, just take your time. There's 30 plus years
yourself,
here.
Yeah.
Just chip away, and like.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great quote to remember. So
cool.
So
Brett,
if I chip away at it,
There was a really good question when I said before, does anybody have any questions before we round things up? Because sometimes it takes a while to get through there. The first response to that was, awesome chat, no questions required. Cheers, from Deja Voodoo.
Yeah.
Which I thought, everyone's been a bit quiet, but maybe we're onto a
ticked all the
onto a good
boxes.
thing. Yeah. But my friend Link, who goes by the name Big Fella Link, I said I'm 6'3", he's 6'5".
Wow. Right.
Yeah. He says, okay, here's a question for both of you. Playing a Strat, you can only choose one selector switch setting. Which is it? So which position for you, if you could only use one on a Strat? That's hard, isn't it?
It's hard, isn't it?
I know what it wouldn't be. For me, anyway.
Well, I think I'd probably have to go with, it'd be either the back or the middle. Probably the back. I'd say the back.
Yeah.
I've got mine rewired so that I've got a tone control on the back pickup.
Nice.
So I can, I can get at least a little bit of tonal variation, and I'm not limited to just the squawky brightness of it. So I'd go the Blackmore route and either be front or back. He just takes the middle one out.
Sure.
He says, you don't like the middle pickup too.
Yep.
Sorry, spinning everywhere. It's too much grey area there. So black or white, that's me.
I very rarely use the middle. Very rarely use the middle. So for me, that is a tough one, isn't it? I'm going to throw a spanner in the works here. If I could have one position, and this isn't standard, I have a neck on switch. Oh, I still get my iMac. I'll just go back this way. Got split switch. Yeah, it's all backwards. There it is.
You can combine the back and the necks, say?
Yeah, so I could be on the bridge pickup and then kick in the neck pickup.
I originally had this wired, so there was a blend knob. Like
That's the
one
other way to
master
do it.
tone and a blend knob which would blend the front and back together, but I just never found a use for it, to be honest.
That's the rhythm sound that I've been chasing for years, and it wasn't until I got a Telecaster and used that middle position that I went, that's what I've been searching for. So if I could have one.
Tellies are incredible beasts, because I got an ESP telly, which is still here. It's still hanging on the wall there. I've changed the colour and the neck and everything. It's got one of those Sir necks on it, but I played that for years. I did my whole Big Sky album with it and played live with it for a long time with 11 to 52s on it. So it was a tough beast to manage. But I'm back to 10. I'm back to 10 to 52 now.
Okay.
I think if I was touring a lot and playing a lot, I'd get match fit enough to put the 11s back on.
Okay.
But there are things you can do with lighter strings that you just can't do with the heavy ones. That's just how it is.
I tried eights. I tried eights for the first time recently because my hands were playing up.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. I didn't have any of that loss in tone that everyone told me would be there. When I played my big open chords, I just had to be a little bit more careful of how I hit it.
Yeah.
But it took away any fight and anything I could think I could play. And
TJ went to Halen and Holdsworth's house with Scott Henderson many years ago. In fact, the very first song TJ and I recorded, the lead guitars, we tracked using the prototype box that Alan built for a thing called the harness, which was a box, like a load box you put in between a Marshall and a speaker cabinet. So that's what he brought back from Alan's place. But when he got out there, Alan, just chatting to him about this stuff, and he realised Alan was using 8 to 36 on his guitars. Very, very light strings. And TJ tried him out for a while with his tapping, and he pulled massive sounds out of it. And the conclusion we came to was the lighter the strings and the lighter the attack, the bigger the sound.
Yep.
Whereas the bigger the string, the heavier the attack, the bigger the sound. Now, Stuart Fraser could play 12 to 58 in standard tuning and play them like I was playing a set of 10s. And they were amazing. Like he got the idea from Mark Lazotte from Diesel.
Yep.
Mark uses massive strings, and I think Danny Spencer uses 12s. Like a lot of guys I know, big strings, and man, props. I'd be in hospital if I tried to play that stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I just can't do it. And but yeah, it's an interesting journey, the string gauge thing. But you've got to what are you trying to do? how are you trying to do it, and what are you capable of doing without hurting yourself? Like I remember a young guy came to me at MI, and he'd gone from playing 9s to 13s overnight because he watched the Stevie Ray Vaughan video, and he ended up a month later he had his arm in a sling. So I mean, you know,
the Stevie Ray Vaughan effect. There was a video by Rick Beato recently. If people don't know him, he's a great YouTuber. Very, very good content from Rick.
Yeah, it's great.
And he was saying that he was talking to Dave Friedman about a certain tone that he wasn't able to get in drop tuning or something. And Dave said to him, "You're using the wrong gauge string. You need light strings for that." And he's like, "Surely not," and tried it. And they had some tone comparisons of it all. And yeah, the lighter strings sounded better. So I said I went down to the 8s. I think I'm going to step back up to about a 9 for now and just see how that goes now that I don't have any issues. Could be the way to go. Picks.
Yeah, I even do the half gauges. So, you know,
I did try
the difference.
I did try 9.5 for a little while, and that was still a little bit too much just with some of the RSI that I had in here. But I'm good now, so I'm going to try 9s again.
Yeah, it's a very personal thing. I often looked at the country players, how beautiful their left hand movement was. It was so delicate, you know, like they all seem to have it. Like it's just beautiful. They're like they don't strangle the strings or anything like that. They're very, very deliberate. And I thought they're probably using light strings because of the bends. You know, they want to do all those. Yeah. You know, Steve Travato, who was the country teacher at MI for a long time, he was doing a play-along book with a CD. And I was sitting at home one day in LA, and TJ rang me up because TJ was engineering it for him. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing." And he said, "Can you come down to the studio and play some slides? Steve needs a slide solo." So I came down to Cherokee Studios, and Steve said, "Yeah, I want to have a slide solo on this CD. So if you wouldn't mind doing it, that'd be great." And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." So I did my shtick, you know. He said, "That was great. Thanks very much." And I said, "So what's this all about?" And he said, "Oh, I'm doing a whole country play-along book. I've got Jerry Donahue from the Helicasters and Albert Lee coming in tomorrow." And I said, "I will be coming in tomorrow," just quietly, you know. So I came back the next day and I got to sit right next to Jerry Donahue and Albert Lee and watch them solo. Wow. Right there.
Yeah.
And Jerry Donahue, not to be confused with Jerry Douglas, the dobro player. This is Jerry Donahue of some of the bending stuff that guy could do was just ridiculous, you know. Just, I mean, 3 strings going in different directions all at the same time, and yeah, he was using very light strings, and I'm convinced that's it. They use the light strings because of those possibilities, the way they can bend different intervals, the way they'll react differently, you know. Yep. A set of 9s or 8s will react very differently if you bend 2 at the same time as opposed to, you know, 12s or even 10s. So
absolutely.
Got to be a reason. And Albert Lee, let me just say, like, I mean, he did 3 takes of a solo that was at least 2 minutes long, rapid tempo, and every one of those takes was perfect. I just went, how are you going to choose which one you're going to use? You should have just had him do one because you'll never pick him.
Wow.
Most lovely guy in the world. He's just like sitting there going, could someone put some money in the meter for me? And I was like, I'll go.
Great.
TJ couldn't believe it. He said, he's English. He said, I expected him to come in going, yeah, I'll do it, you know.
Yeah.
Man, Albert Lee's English.
So you said about sitting in the room with them. Do you know the guitar player Tom Quayle?
Oh, absolutely,
Yep.
yeah. I don't know him personally, but I do know of him. Yeah.
So when I was in Germany last year, I had some studio time at the event, and it was Dave Friedman suggested to me. He said, hey, let's have a guitar battle between Sammy Bowler and Tom Quayle. And I sat there with Tom as he's playing, and he plays in a funny tuning. Did you know that? He tunes all fourths, right? And he's sitting beside me, and I'm talking to him, and he's warming up. And to hear the sound of his fingers slapping the stainless steel frets just as he's warming up.
Yeah, really powerful, isn't it? Yeah, he's got a left-hander.
Whoa.
The legitimacy of his left hand is amazing.
Mm-hmm. I have a video on my YouTube channel of him letting me play his guitar and him giving me a bit of a lesson on the tuning he uses, and yeah, you can hear it. I hold the camera up, and you see to his right hand, then you see his left hand, and just the sound coming out of there. Incredible.
Well, I mean, yeah, I've seen clips of Tom picking, and he's obviously an incredible picker. But I think he could just play all left hand and wouldn't even need to pick. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
I have one last subject I want to touch on before we hit that 3 hour mark, mate. Jeez, I told you it goes.
Yeah.
Tone wood when it comes to guitars. Do you believe that the wood the guitar's made out of affects the tone, or do you think a pickup is a pickup? It picks up string vibration.
No, it's got to matter, but that information comes from people more informed than me. And once again, Holdsworth. This was back in the 80s. I was reading an interview, and this is when everyone's going, the heavier the better. They're building guitars out of brass. It's getting to the point of ridiculous. Heavy, heavy, heavy. That's where the sustain is, heavy, And Alan's like, no, you're wrong. No, lighter the body, light bodies, ash, older. He said, I even tried a guitar made out of balsa wood, but that was too light. That was ridiculous.
Yeah, right.
And the other thing Alan said, they said, why don't you use a Floyd Rose? Because you use the whammy bar a lot. And he said, because the strings don't travel through the block. He said the block is where the resonance comes from. That way it resonates through the body.
Yep.
That guy, man, he was just so switched on to things. No one was talking about this back then.
Yep.
No one was talking about light guitar wood, and Alan just straight out of the blue, no, it's got to be light. The first guy to put a humbucker in a Strat before Eddie Van Halen. I'm sure Eddie had the same idea, but Alan did it, He's so disappointed when he said he had the Strat that he built, must have been one of the guitars he was using with UK or someone. He said, I sold it to a guy and he just went and put the single coils back into it. He said he just totally missed the potential of that guitar. And yeah, what a genius, But yeah, Alan was the guy who was saying that. So, no, I like I said, I always defer to people that are much more knowledgeable than me. I've never had the luxury of trying different woods, I've got a guitar, aren't I lucky, So whatever it's made out of, thankfully it's here,
Yep.
But I'm not that guy that will spend my fortune on amps and mics and strings and things. I can't afford to experiment. I'm just not that rich. So
It's funny. I had somebody approach me a couple of years ago who had developed a brass block for the Floyd Rose and wanted me to do a comparison. And I said, mate, you come here and you pull the bloody guitar apart and put it all in, to do the AB. By all means, I don't want to know about that. And we did. And we recorded direct into the computer just to get, check out all the waveforms and listen.
Yeah.
And there was no difference in sustain between a standard and the brass, but there was a big difference in tone. Just
there you go.
On the block of the Floyd Rose. Yeah. So to do that AB was like, hang on, that's not what we were expecting. But I just had that top end zing was gone. It was a lot warmer.
Well, I never underestimate what people are capable of hearing that I'm not. And also just where their research is and where you may not understand it. When I first heard about Eric Johnson talking about the old, is it carbon batteries versus alkaline?
Something like that he was going on.
When he talked about that, I thought, oh, come on, what are you going on about? But then later on, a mate of mine named John Ziegler explained battery sag to me. And he said, no, you don't understand. He said, those old batteries, he said, the carbon batteries, he said, they put out more power. But as they fade, they will change the sound of your pedal. That's called battery sag. Then I remembered reading a Dwayne Allman interview where he said he had this fuzz pedal he used with the Allman Brothers, and he had to put a battery in it and leave it plugged in for a certain amount of time. And then he knew he'd get the whole gig out of it. But it was after the battery had drained for a certain amount of time, it had the right sound.
Wow.
Just changed the sound of the pedal. Whereas someone told me that Duracells and alkaline batteries put out less voltage but more consistently for a longer period of time. So I went, well, there you go. I didn't, I was ill-informed.
Yeah.
I made an assumption and I didn't have all the information to base that assumption on. So, yeah, I'm always ready to listen to someone plead their case. Like I walked through the halls of MI one day and I heard Scott's playing and I knew it straight. I went, that's only the one and only Scott Henderson.
Yep.
And here's Scott in one of the larger rooms with his bunch of disciples around him, me being one of them.
Yep.
And he's got his entire rig set up. And I went in and said, what's going on? And he said, I'm ABing guitar cables. And I went, what? And he said, yeah, I've got a Belden cable and a something else cable. And he was switching between the two. And I swear for a split second I heard a difference. And then I lost it.
Yep.
And but he could hear it.
You really
And
got
I
to
went-
focus on things like that. I know I compared converters for recording about 10 years ago. I had
Yeah,
just a cheap M audio interface and I had an Apogee. And I sat there A-Bing, listened to music. And it was a good 10 minutes because you're focusing on different things. Am I hearing any difference in the low end? Any the crack in the mid-range, blah, blah, blah. And after 10 minutes, I went, the decay of the cymbals. I'm starting to hear that. If that took me 10 minutes of critical listening to pick that, is it really worth worrying about?
well, it's just you can't deny. Look at the way Jacob Collier hears music.
I don't know who that
Rick
is.
that young guy that's just look him up.
I will.
And look, Rick Beato's son. Have you seen him do the ear training?
freaky deaky perfect pitch, yeah.
Wow, yeah, Dylan, I think his name.
Yep,
is.
that's right.
Man,
Yep.
that is just what a trip.
Yep.
I mean, the way he would hear, I would just hear a chord, but the way he would hear it,
Yep.
or anyone with a perception like that, connected to the musical knowledge to understand it, and the possibilities they would hear, and you just, I just have to always say the jury's out, because just because I can't hear it doesn't mean it's not there. You know what I mean? It's like I'd love to hear like my dogs one day, just to see what's really happening out there that I don't know about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you've got to keep your mind open.
Yeah. Brett, I think we should wrap things up. But mate, like you said earlier, you could talk for hours about this kind of stuff. So I'd love to have you back on sometime if you're up for it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I've got your email there, mate, and your phone number, so I'll keep in touch. But it's been a pleasure talking to you.
It's been a great wave. Yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. It's not that scary once you get past the whole live thing. It did freak me out for maybe the first 25 episodes, and then I had a moment, as I said, where
You're on a roll now, Rick. I mean, this is great. I mean, I could imagine countless other players that would love to have a chat. So I'll try and send them your way.
mate, I'll have a chat to you after we end this broadcast and see if you can recommend anybody for me. But yeah, folks, thank you so much for tuning in all that time. Thank you to Brett for taking the time out. And please remember, like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. I don't have that many subscribers considering the content that I'm putting out right now. And
that's how you get them, man. That's how you get them.
Yep. I'm actually going to go, now that I've got my new laptop, there's a music store, Gold Coast Music on the Gold Coast here, have said, mate, you want to come in and demo any of this stuff? So I'm going to see if they've got all the Fender standard Strats that are out now. I'm going to do a bit of a comparison between all those. I think that'll make for some good content. But please like, subscribe, share, all that kind of thing. Help get the word out, because I've had some great guests. I've got some more coming up just this week alone. We've got Bruce Egnator. I've got my friend Vladimir from Catpick Studios, who's just a smaller YouTuber like me. We're going to talk about being a smaller YouTuber. And then I have Doug Rappaport. Brett, have you heard Doug Rappaport?
Yeah. Doug plays with Edgar Winter.
Edgar
right?
Winter, that's right, mate.
Yeah. Great player.
Yeah.
Say the least. Yeah.
I was very stoked that he said he'd take the time. I've got Erwin Thomas in the works. I've got, I'm going to get Jack the Bear, the mastering guy, because he is not only great with the mastering music, but mastering life. He's a great motivational speaker. Man, I got quite a few people lined up. So please, folks, like, subscribe, share, all that kind of stuff. Brett, thank you again, mate. I'm going to hit the button right now.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, folks. See ya.